TitleMatchNetwork.com.
The RF Video Shoot interview series today, we're joined by none other than a true genius of professional wrestling, Lanny Poffo.
I am the genius full of glory and renown. You can call me Lanny.
As long as you're not leaping, right?
I can't leap anymore. I'm going to be 50 years old December 28th, and right now it's October 2nd, 2004. So do the math.
I guess my first question I want to ask you, what was it like growing up in a wrestling family? You had a great wrestling father, Angelo Poffo.
Well, I wouldn't know how to grow up either way. I mean, that's it was normal to me. It opened doors. I mean, other people have to give exorbitant amounts of money to try to get trained by somebody who obviously doesn't know the business, because else why wouldn't they be wrestling? Everybody's opening up wrestling schools, and a lot of sharks in the water. And some of these, like for example, if I had a wrestling school, what could I tell a young man coming up today? Because I only know about wrestling in the 80s. I've made no evolution. Right. I haven't changed. I haven't gotten better. I have gotten worse. And I don't know how to help a person adapt and adjust in the new environment. So I'd be just taking their money.
Right.
And I'm afraid a lot of money's being taken, and I'm not sure if they're getting enough bang for their buck. So thank you, my father, for being a wrestler and opening the door for the Macho Man and his brother.
What were your earliest memories of wrestling when you were a child? I mean, what are your earliest memories as far as you remembering, what wrestling was like? I mean, when did you first realize that you were a fan? How were you exposed to the business? Let me ask you that. When
was the business exposed to me, or how was I exposed?
Did your father expose you to the business, or did he try to shield you from it, like at an early age?
I remember that my earliest memory was in Houston at the auditorium, the one that Paul Bausch promoted.
Sam Houston Coliseum.
Sam Houston Coliseum, that's right. And I've wrestled there. I should know that. But, I'm getting a little older. And that genius thing might have been a little bit of a work. And as I'll prove later, he did a deal with the same angle that Pepper Gomez worked many times over with people like Ray Stevens, where they get on the top rope and jump on his stomach, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you jump across the neck. All of a sudden, ambulance things. And we shouldn't have been invited to that one because it caused a riot.
Right.
And I was involved in my father's riot. And getting back to the dressing room in those days was a little harder than it is now, because thankfully, Vince McMahon, in his wisdom, has a thing called guard rails and security guards, so it's like a lot easier. Plus, there's so many smart marks or smarks. So even though they're raised to the attitude of suspended disbelief, they're less likely to become violent, I think.
Right.
Okay, I know when I was working heel, I was never in fear of anything, where when I did it before with no guardrails, I was always in fear. So it's much better handled now. The heat is controlled. In those days, well, it was a horrible situation to have a young boy like me, watching all that. But I do remember it, so it must have left an etch. So I remember going to the International Amphitheater, and it was the greatest wrestling I'd ever seen. I mean, it was fabulous wrestling, but they weren't drawing. And the reason was they had lost their TV, and it was being sold from Fred Kohler to Bruiser, Schneider, and Gagne. And they had a thing called UHF. Remember, you probably don't remember what not the rabbit, but there was a little circle in the back of the TV set.
Yeah. Was this in Chicago?
Yeah.
Okay.
And nobody had that kind of TV. But it's hard. They worked so hard, and they built it up slowly. And they finally got it up to another pinnacle. Because this was in the aftermath of the greatest match of them all. Pat O'Connor against Buddy Rogers. Right. I'm sure you've seen that.
Right. 2 out of 3 falls.
In Comiskey Park, in front of all those screaming people. What a phenomenal match that was. And then I saw, the guy that made the greatest impression on me was Johnny Valentine, Big John.
Right.
And wow, he'd just stare at you. And I tried to imitate him. Lousiest imitation of Johnny Valentine you've ever seen. I tried to imitate quite a few people. That one I knew I couldn't do, but if I had a wish, but I don't have the face for it. You see, he used to, you're not nervous, right? I'm just a friendly guy. Johnny Valentine, look at you. he looked like a sniper. He looked like he'd shoot at you and then sleep like a baby because he didn't have that. It is a portrait in seriousness. And if you ever see me heel, there's nothing serious about me.
Now, as far as like your dad kayfabing you on the business, when did he actually explain to you, how the business worked when you were a kid?
Well, I was starting to have emotional problems over it. I was starting to get all worked up and getting ridiculous, so it was time to sit me down. And I remember I asked him, well, what about Johnny Valentine? He says, well, him too, but he's just better than the rest of us. Yeah.
How close were you and your brother to the inside of the business as kids?
Not really close at all, except we had a lot of wrestlers over. We had a swimming pool back in the day when there were very few swimming pools. And we had the first color TV in the neighborhood also. So a lot of people that we didn't like pretended to be our friends to watch the Super Bowl. We didn't, Joe Namath and everything.
Right.
And even before that, the Rose Bowl and things like that. So people came over because of what we had. And I imagine, hey, we chlorinate the pool, they pee in it. I got resentful.
Now, as a teenager, did you want to be a wrestler like your father?
Actually, I wanted to be a baseball player, but then I thought wrestling was something in case I didn't make it. Well, I certainly didn't make it in baseball. And neither did my brother, although he was the best of both of us. When he got out of baseball after 4 years in the minor leagues, he was skinny as a rail, but it was all muscle.
Right.
And you could tell from the first match that he was going to be great. Like he was all over the ring, and he made everybody else look like they were on slow-mo.
Huh. At what point did you say, you know what, I want to give it a shot, that I want to be a wrestler?
Well, I knew that in my senior year in high school, my baseball was, I wasn't doing that well against West Suburban Conference ball players, so I knew I wasn't going to be drafted or go into baseball. By draft, I mean the baseball draft, not the military.
Right.
In fact, I graduated high school in 73, and the war was over in 72, Vietnam and everything, So I was going to be a wrestler, and I was skinny, and I had acne, and I looked like a punk. I looked like a boy. Even though in high school, I was known as a pretty muscular guy. And when I got into the wrestling business, I looked like, boy, this guy doesn't belong. So I had to struggle with that handicap, just looking too young. And even now, I'm going to be 50. I look pretty young now.
I did not think that you're going to be 50.
Yeah, well, start. You know what I want to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you do a lot of traveling, like when you were young with your father? Did you live in
Yes.
one place, or did you travel the territories with your father?
We lived in many territories, and then when I became in second grade, and my brother was in fourth grade, we stayed in Downers Grove, Illinois, 3909 Bennett Road. And we had a beautiful home, and that's where I stayed until senior in high school. But even then, we made trips to St. Louis to see, wrestling at the Kiel Auditorium and wrestling at the Chase. And I even remember the Chase Park Plaza and all the great times we had there. And the Peace Arch, they actually did this and then oops, and then went like that, and then it had to do, to meet at the middle.
Right.
And about 4 years ago, I went to St. Louis and spent $6 and got to the top.
Huh.
So that's something I can
Hey, we
recommend.
did that.
It was, have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was a little nervous and a little claustrophobic.
It's like a little car going to the top. You feel like, how can you get up there? But
I do recommend it. It's the best $6 you'll ever spend in a must-see tourist attraction.
It's cool.
And as a matter of fact, this will prove, there were so many naysayers. What a stupid waste of the money. What a ridiculous thing. And it took years to build. And now it's the number 2 attraction, second only to the Statue of Liberty.
Huh.
And it caused more charisma for that town and more infrastructure, more
pride,
and money.
Right.
Now, tourists come in and spend money.
Right.
And not just the $6. There's also a gift shop.
Right.
And then they get you there, and then hotel, and this and that.
And all the restaurant business, that whole area.
Right.
What's that? Laclede's Landing? Is that the whole area?
It's a phenomenal thing. In other words, they refused to listen to the naysayers, and they went ahead with their plan. And St. Louis is the better for it.
They also got river boat gambling now, I think.
Yeah, they got the gambling all up there. What territory did you like traveling to the most with your father when you were young? And what wrestlers did you like the most?
I say my favorite time watching my father wrestle was against the late Wilbur Schneider, the late Pat O'Connor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems like everybody's gone. But that's not, I wouldn't say that's unusual, considering that my father's going to be 80 on April the 10th. What is amazing is all the wrestlers from my generation that are no longer with us. And that is just plain unnecessary, ridiculous, and sad.
I'm going to ask you about that later on.
Well, I'd love to tell you about it later on then.
Definitely.
But it's broken my heart. And I'm almost numb to it because everyone on the list, and people ask me, are you amazed that it's happening? I said, not really. I'm amazed that they live so long because I know a little bit about the human body. It's very frail. And one mistake and it's over. I mean, jaywalking is a mistake and it's over. Mm-hmm. And it's something you can't learn from. Check left, right, and left again because things may have changed when the last time you looked to the right. Anyway, and I feel that your life is not judged by the duration. It's judged by the donation. In other words, how may I serve? That's my mantra, not what's in it for me. Everybody's got a what's in it for me attitude. It's how may I serve? Because when you pray to God, it's like looking into a mirror. If you say to God, what's in it for me? God's going to say, what's in it for me? But if you say, how may I serve? God's going to answer you back, how may I serve you? And that's why the people that give the most get the most. And it never ends. So what goes around comes around. It's true.
It is true.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking earlier when we were out, you said spending some time in Hawaii as a child.
Right. Randy and I got into school early because they figured we were on the road. They might as well get us into school early because we might flunk or something, because of the disadvantage of traveling from territory to territory. Well, what happened is we were both honor students, and that wasn't going to happen. And my dad had a little scheme that with the war in Vietnam escalating, he thought that he might be able to better protect us if we wasted a year in Hawaii while we just played baseball, had a little vacation. And then, that seems despicable, but now we could run for president.
Right.
My father served in the Navy, and he didn't want Vietnam in our future. And I love you. Thank you for that. Yes. Because the war was over in 72. I graduated in 73, and it worked.
Right.
So we went to Hawaii, and my father was working for Eddie Francis. We got exposed to so many of a different type of wrestler. The great Curtis Iakea. They called him King Curtis Iakea, the greatest interview of them all. And for those of you that remember him with Kamala, that wasn't the greatest interview of them all. By that time, he had to get his point across in 1 minute. For a man like Curtis, and he went highs and lows, and he cried and he laughed right on there. And then after the red light was off, he was still an interesting man to talk to.
Huh.
Something. That was great. I remember those days. And Jim Haiti was there. Not a good interview. A great worker. Dutch Schultz, who was Dutch Savage, great at everything. And a lot of the boys knocked him. He was despised because he was an arrogant person. But don't take away his work. I mean, the man was great. I saw him in his prime. And let's see, Nick Bachman was there. And I thought he was phenomenal.
Right.
And this was before he got his big break with Vern. But he definitely looked the part of a champion. And not all the champions look that part.
Right. What other guys were you exposed to that, you really were, maybe a big fan of? Like Jimmy Snuka, was he...
Oh, yeah. When I went to Portland, Oregon in 1977, 78, Jimmy Snuka took me under his wing. And I thought, wow, I hang around him, I'll probably be looking like Mr. Hawaii myself. Not true. He took me, brother, you're going to come with me. We're going to play pool. We're going to do this, do that. I hadn't seen the inside of a gym in 48 hours. And we get to Seattle, and I look like, he looked like a milk-fed football player. So I said, something's wrong. I better not hang around with him anymore. Evidently, he's conquered, and he can get away with it. I'm not going to get away with staying out late and abusing my body. So I was very nice to him, and I said, brother, I can't go with you.
Basically, when you actually told your father that you wanted to be in the business, did he try to talk you out of it at all?
Well, yeah, because I was about 10 years old and I thought I could pass as a midget. And he explained to me that the difference, even though I was short as a midget, the fans would not buy me as a midget. I was a big boy
Right.
that just was 10. And of course, I couldn't understand. You know, I always thought my dad was really stupid for saying that. Actually, turned out he was right about a lot of things. How about almost everything?
Huh.
I apologize.
At what time did Randy say he wanted to get into the business? Was it after you or before you?
Well, he wanted to get into the business after baseball had treated him cruelly.
Right.
Now, there's a guy that's tenacity with a capital T. In 1971, he graduates high school. He's the best baseball player I've ever seen. He had a nice short swing. He had big forearms. He had more power than he hit. His last 2 years in the varsity, junior and senior year, he had like a 536 average for 2 years.
Huh.
Now, that's better than a flip of a coin that he's going to get a hit.
Right.
He had so many home runs. He is still a legend because do you see that building? He hit that building and this and that. You know, he was a switch hitter. And then when he separated his shoulder, he even tried to make it as a switch thrower, an ambidextrous thrower. I don't think that's ever been attempted.
Unheard of.
He actually signed with the White Sox as a left-handed first baseman. And the reason, I mean, I thought he was going to make it. I mean, they signed him and everything, but as great as, and he could make the throw for a first baseman, but he looked a little awkward doing it. You know, he looked like,
Didn't look natural.
It looked like you look a little bit like you're a girl. It's just hard. It's easier to be a switch hitter than a switch thrower, evidently.
Right.
So, anyway, he picked up the pieces. That was 1975. 10 years later, he's in Madison Square Garden. So you've got to give it to him.
Definitely. So he got into business before you then, obviously, right?
No, I got in the business in 73.
Okay, and then
He got in 75, even though he's 2 years my senior.
right.
2 years and a month.
Let's go into your training when you broke into the business. Who was responsible for actually getting you in the ring, teaching the psychology and the bumps and all that?
Angelo Poffo.
Okay.
Yeah, and we would have critique. And not only that, but he had a friend, Paul Christie, who was also excellent. And I love Paul Christie. He helped me in many ways. I was a little shy with girls. I had acne. He helped me out with that. Boy, this guy was smoother than a toilet seat with girls. And, you know, just hanging around him, he's helping me out and doing this and that. And finally, I was 16 years old, and he tells this girl, who I'll not name,
All right.
he says, not in so many words, but the equivalent of, I give you the boy, bring me back the man. So, thank you, Paul Christie. And I guess I owe you $5 million for what you've done for me. But I'll just say thank you.
As far as in the ring training, what did you go through and how rough was it?
Well, it wasn't rough at all. I'm not one of those guys that they made do 1,000 sumo squats. And then they, like in the Florida territory with Eddie Graham, like I understand some of the boys, the story Hulk Hogan told, the first thing they do is make you do all those squats so you can't defend yourself. And then they make you get in the referee's position. And then they drop a knee on your Achilles heel and break your ankle. You know,
Yeah, Matsuda was doing this.
Yeah, everybody did it. You know, that was like fun.
Right.
And I'm sure they got off on it. I think it was reprehensible and it was horrible and stupid. You know, but that's the way they thought. We're protecting the business. Okay, you know.
Right.
Whatever.
Your first territory that you actually started working for, who would that have been?
Well, when I got out of my first match was in Aurora, Illinois, and it was against my father. I wore the mask. I was the Masked Avenger there in the Secret Side. I was the skinniest guy you ever met. And that ever just trying to hold my trunks up. And I thought I was great because my father led me through everything. And I said, well, this is easy. I'm going to be a star. Then I wrestled a guy named Bobby Van. It was like the blind leading the blind. And I guess I said, maybe I'm not as great as I thought. And that was kind of like typified my entire babyface thing. A great worker could raise me to his level. When I wrestled Terry Funk, you'd have thought I was the greatest babyface you ever met. because that was him taking a 5 and raising him to a 10. But when I wrestled a 5, I became a 5. And when I wrestled a 0, I didn't drag him up to 5. I went down to his level.
Right.
I'm not the kind of a guy that worked with a broom. I'm not Harley Race that can take George Gulas and go an hour. You know, Harley Race, God's gift to wrestling. He can take a guy without talent, and as long as he's willing to listen, you're willing to listen. You know, well, I'm going to help you out. Scoop, slam, don't move. And the man was great, right? Yeah, and he made me look great. But was I great? No, I was just a good listener. I was good at steno.
Right. Now, after your first match, you said was with your father, and your other match didn't go too well. How many times was it before you started getting the hang of the business?
Well, I wrestled 21 years, and I never really felt I did. I never came to that conclusion because the opponent, if he was great, he made me great. If he wasn't, I wasn't. And I don't think you're truly great until you can take a broom and bring him up to your level. No, I never thought I was great. I thought I was capable of a great match. But that doesn't make you great.
Right.
You're not great until you can make a broom look like a king. I felt that as a babyface, I had a better than average interview. I felt that I could be a ring announcer. I also felt that as the genius, full of glory and renown, I was unique in the business and I could make my gimmick work. Ricky Starr, ever heard of him?
Mm-hmm.
The ballet dancer?
Yeah.
See, I tried to copy quite a few people. When I saw a tape of Ricky Starr, I knew that I could do that. And I said to my dad, I said, did you see Ricky Starr? He says, yeah, I know him. He's great. I said, I think I can do that gimmick. And this is before I even got in the business.
Right.
I saw his tape and I got all excited because I said, I knew I couldn't imitate Johnny Valentine. Because my dad pointed out, I don't have the look. Johnny Valentine, he was a totally handsome man, but he was deadpan. I mean, please get a tape of him. I mean, and when every time he made a move, and Greg is great, but Greg will even admit he doesn't come up to his father's knees. Greg knows that. I'm not saying it. Greg is great.
Right.
But Johnny Valentine, there was only one. And he was, let's put it this way. If wrestling's a work, and you know it's a work, and I sit you down and tell you it's a work, go watch Johnny Valentine against Wahoo McDaniel, and you'll come away thinking I'm wrong.
Huh.
You know, but then the rest of the card will expose the business for you. And then you'll know that I'm right.
Right. What was the first major territory that you actually worked?
Well, when I was in Paducah, Kentucky, that was like 2 times a week, and my dad would go with me and Paul Christie, and they criticized me all the way home, and
right.
I was for the better for it, because it's better hearing it from friends, because the boys are going to knock you anyway. You might as well hear the truth. And it took me quite a long time to grasp the business because I wasn't a natural. I'm a natural gymnast. I'm a natural poet. I'm not a natural wrestler. So it took quite a bit of discipline in order to get me to whatever level I attained. And I really thank my father and Paul Christie for having the patience with me, because I'm sure they wanted to rip their hair out, because I'm the kind of guy you have to tell things twice to.
Right. Now, you were a gymnast before getting into the business, right?
I was 8 years old, and I quit when I was 10, but I continued in the backyard. I went to Carl Engstrom's School of the Dance,
right,
and I studied gymnastics and ballet with Louise and Carl Engstrom, the same guy that got my father into the business. And Carl Engstrom was a boxer and a wrestler and an adagio dancer. He was with his wife on the Ed Sullivan Show as adagio dancing. I'm not sure quite what adagio dancing is, but it looks like the man and the woman are at war. They dance and they beat each other up. They throw each other all about. You know, it's an amazing thing.
Right. Now, did gymnastics help you at all?
Yes, when I was going to copy Ricky Starr's gimmick.
Right.
But my father warned me about that. He said Ricky Starr had a lot of trouble with the boys about that gimmick because it had never been done before. And by that I mean he acted effeminately. Because when you take gymnastics and ballet, put them together, people suspicious that you might be homosexual.
Right.
I'm not a homosexual. I don't know if Ricky Starr was, but he was an amateur boxer and an amateur wrestler, and he was able to handle any trouble he got into, even though he weighed 160 pounds.
Wasn't he the first guy that would do all the tumbling and the headstands, kind of like?
I don't know if he was the first, but he was the best.
Right.
Eduardo Carpentier, I don't know who came first.
Right.
There was Argentina Roca.
Right.
There were quite a few of them.
Like, he had the most unusual style. He would do like a tumble and then grab the guy in like a leg scissors and flip him over, kind of.
Right, and when I say I copied him, I didn't copy every single move because he was better than me at most of those moves. But on the other hand, I took it to another level. I enhanced myself by doing my strengths. In other words, I was affected by him, but then I made the gimmick my own. Now, the greatest moment I had with that gimmick was in 1975. I was in the Amarillo territory. And I was trying to butcher it up a little because I really respected Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk. And I knew that they were very serious wrestlers and everything. So I only did it a little bit. I had the dial on 1.
Right.
And that Terry Funk, he came up to me and said, "Oh, by golly, this is getting over, Lanny. You're going to be great." He says, "What I want you to do is..." Sorry, but...
Always no questions. I love them. So.
Yeah. He wanted me to fag it up more.
Right.
So I got these dance skins that I was wearing and trunks over those. And my mother, who was traveling with us, and I was only 20 or 21 years old. This is the greatest time of my life. Terry Funk, the greatest worker that I've ever seen in my life, is going to work an angle with me. And so I get all these white dance skins, and my mother, because they only came in black and white,
Right.
my mother bought this RIP dye. And, we're on the road and everything, and she made yellow chartreuse. When you walk in with yellow dance skins, it's very hard not to get over,
Right.
especially the way I walked.
Right.
So then Terry Funk got me into the studio, and he started a 6-week program. He brought in Marie Laverne, Ann Laverne's daughter. Are you familiar with her? She's a girl wrestler, and she's in Amarillo.
Right.
And Terry Funk got on the TV, and he gave a great interview. And he started calling me Lynette, having a little fun with my name, Lanny.
Right.
And he says, "Lynette, we got a girl for you that you can wrestle." He says, "Somebody that's on your league. I introduce you to Marie Laverne." And there she is. And she said, "I'll be there, Steve. I'm going to go." So everybody's laughing and it was fun time at the wrestling. A 10-year-old boy points and laughs and looks at me. What's he saying? That I'm normal. He's saying he's normal and that I'm odd.
Right.
So, which is good for them. They're laughing. It's the psychology of ridicule. You know who hates blacks more than anybody? Poor white trash that are on Jerry Springer. Because the best people don't hate blacks. It's only the people that say, "Well, we may be poor white trash, but God damn it, we ain't no nigger." So in other words, that's their psychology. We're the lowest of the low, but there's somebody lower, and they rejoice in it.
Right.
Or the people that have achieved some affluence and social class distinction, they're okay. They want to help people, you see, because they're secure. So Terry Funk got me in the ring in the studio. We had done several things in every town. And he takes a blade and he cuts in the back room, he cuts my seam. Just enough so he knows where it is. And he takes me and strips me naked in the studios. Well, I was so happy. People were laughing. The boys were laughing. I mean, I was proud to be in the business. And we had so many discussions about it. He says, "Oh, I'm just so glad that you have the attitude that you can do this because," he says, "we've got to give the people something for their money."
Right.
And he said something that I never forgot. I never will. He says, "I'm not against anything that's going to get over. And by God, we got to pop this territory." And this was right before he got the belt. And it was good news and bad news. I was so happy for him. However, it was the end of our run because now he had to make the loop.
Right.
And but I loved working at Amarillo, and I loved both Funks. And Herman Guest, too. He was, and the late Ken Farber. And it was a very happy time for me.
From there, where did you go?
Well, then we went to the Gulf Coast. My brother and I teamed up. We were a babyface team. And then we went back to the Sheik, the original Sheik in Michigan and
Right.
Ohio. And then we went to Charlotte, North Carolina. I was there for a year and a half. My brother was there for about 6 months. And I made the mistake. See, I was a hot heel in Amarillo because you can imagine that's a very homophobic place.
Right.
You know, they're all cowboys and where men are men and the sheep know it.
Right.
So I went to Charlotte, and my brother was the skinny one, and I weighed 230 pounds. Now, you would have thought that in a shoot, I could beat Randy because he was giving away 40 pounds. Well, we used to shoot all the time, and I guarantee you, no matter what I weighed and no matter what he weighed, half the time he would win and the other half I would lose.
Huh.
But it's no big whoop because I saw him in takedowns with Bob Roop, who came in, who was in the Olympics in 1968 in Mexico City as a heavyweight wrestler. And Randy defeated him in takedowns.
Wow.
So I didn't feel so badly. You know.
How long did it take Randy to catch up to you as far as ability in the ring?
Oh, he was better than me the first
Quick
time he
learner?
got in the ring. And he's a natural athlete. And you only have to tell him once about something. He's got the best kinesthetic sense of everything. I'm a frustrating guy. I have to work harder I'm like a square peg in a round hole in this wrestling business. And the only way I could make it was to be a freak. And if I was born with an eyeball in the center of my head, I'd be the Cyclops and I'd make a fortune.
Right.
But the thing is, I'm a normal looking guy. I'm not particularly anything. The only thing that I'm particular is I'm willing to make an asset of myself in order to get over. Now, I made the mistake of going to Charlotte, North Carolina as a heel, but I had all this history of remembering how well I got over. So I went in full-fledged with my gimmick that got over so well in Amarillo, and the office did not like it. I was hated, I was despised, and
Was this Crockett?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they switched me. They said, "Would you stop doing that?" I said, "Yes."
Huh.
And I stopped.
Right.
And that was over. And I stayed there a year and a half, did very well. By well, I mean I never got to the top, but I did well financially.
What year is this?
1976, 77.
Okay.
Yeah, it was I came in right after the celebration of the bicentennial, July 4th. You're too young.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. It was right when Inoki fought Ali. Okay. The week after I started.
Now, you also mentioned before you worked for Sheik in Detroit. What was that territory like?
It was freezing your ass off.
Right.
And the Sheik was always very nice to us, and I'm very sorry that he passed. But like I say, he's from the era where you expect people to die.
Right.
And Sheik was phenomenal, and he was great, and I loved him, and I learned a lot there.
Now, after Crockett, where did you go from there?
Well, I was a year and a half for Crockett. Then I went to Nick Gulas for about a year and a half. Now, everybody says, well, that's the worst place in the world. But I did very well there.
Right.
And when Harley Race came in with the belt, he wrestled me because I was the man at the time. Both I was the big fish in a little pond, but it sure did make me feel good to after Charlotte, and I actually did better for Nick than I did in Charlotte.
Huh. What were you able to learn from Harley Race?
To listen. I'll tell you, Harley Race. If it was my first match, he could have made me look just as good.
Wow.
Because that's the kind of a player he was. And you can't knock success.
Any memories of that territory that stick out, or was it just,
Which one?
Gulas. Went with Harley.
Oh.
Was his son working then?
Yes, George Gulas,
Everybody that we did interviews with said he was,
Yeah, you're right.
Right. Huh.
But the thing is, he loved working with me, and that was my pension.
Right, so you got money.
Right.
Good.
So, actually, the thing is, I did my very best with him, but Harley Race worked with him and defended his belt against him and did even better. He rose him up to you would think George Gulas was the greatest worker you ever saw.
That's what I think Harley told us.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was there, and it's true. So no matter who lies about what, please, I vote that, what did he say about it?
Just basically what you just said right there, that, he worked with the kid and he was the shits and he made him look like $1 million.
Right.
He was even worse than you said, and it $5 million. Okay? So let me exaggerate a little more for you. And I'll tell you what, that just, for all the people that can't do that with George Gulas, don't blame George, it's you. Okay?
Right.
You're not Harley Race. I mean, who is?
Wasn't the reason that promotion pretty much died was because they pushed him so much, and it was just...
Wait a minute. Every promotion is dead except one, right?
Right.
So is there a reason that all promotion... Eddie Graham, he had the greatest promotion in the country. Everything was done strictly by the book. Everything was done with great care. And his promotion died. So, you know, that's one place I never worked. I never worked for Eddie Graham, and I always wish I had.
Getting back to Gulas, where'd you go from there after that run?
Where I went from after Gulas, we went to Halifax, Nova Scotia, Moncton, New Brunswick. The three, my father, my brother, and myself.
Right.
We bought into the promotion for the summer. We made a fortune. Oh, and I worked. Randy was the top heel. I was the top baby face. We went all over. And talk about a guy that could work with a broom. The Macho Man worked with me. He rose me to great levels.
Was that the first time you guys really worked together in a major program?
Yes. And he would criticize me after every match, but he extracted the best out of me. He made me better than I could have ever been with anybody else and Harley Race did it after not knowing me, and he brought me up to great heights.
Wow.
But my brother knew all about me and what I could do, and he knew when to fit it in and how. And
so there was never an ego thing with you and your brother where you didn't want to admit that Randy was better than you. You would admit it back then.
Well, it's obvious that he was better than me. I mean, he was the first match he ever had when he was skinny as a rail. All over the ring. He was better than me at baseball. He was better than me at wrestling. I think I'm better at gymnastics and poetry. Huh. But we'll just leave it at that. Render under Caesar the things that are Caesar's.
From there, where'd you end up?
Let's see. After that, I went by myself to Portland, Oregon.
Don Owens,
and was there for a year and a half.
Is that when you were with Jimmy?
Jimmy Snuka, brother, yeah. Huh. Far out mine. And then Roddy Piper came in, and I said, whoa. Greatest piece of talent I'd seen in my life. He gave the people so much. Unfortunately, he gave so much, he would injure himself. And then he'd tape himself up and get back and injure himself again. And by the time I saw him again in 1985, it was a physical wreck.
Right.
I mean, he had all the injuries. But what a fun person. And in the dressing room, I mean, the dressing room can be a boring place unless there's some high-energy phosphate bonds in the dressing room. This guy was hilarious. He was fun. You know, we were talking about Charlotte. You asked me before about we were talking about Charlotte. We had Chinese food together, and Charlotte was a tremendous experience for me. I'm sorry they didn't go for my Ricky Starr gimmick, but at least I kept it. I didn't even use it after that till I became the genius.
Right.
So my grandfather, Silvio Poffo, who came over on the boat to Ellis Island in 1920 from his home in Italy, Lucca, Tuscany. He says, Lanny, learn a trade, put it aside, and someday you may need it. Well, I learned how to work like Ricky Starr, and I brought it out when I became the genius, and I had quite a run. That was the greatest moments of my life. Now in Charlotte, they ran 3 towns. And 3 towns a night, okay? And then for Greensboro, they'd all come and they'd have a major, they'd only run Greensboro or something like maybe 2 towns that night, the crummy town in Greensboro or some of the big ones,
right,
where they bring everybody on. But for usual, it was 3 towns a night. And one of the towns would always sell out, no matter who his opponent was, and no matter who his tag team partner was, and no matter what else was on the card. One guy always sold out. So it couldn't have been an accident for a year and a half that I was there. Maybe you haven't heard of him, Ric Flair?
Huh.
Okay. Well, then we were getting, it doesn't matter who his opponent was. Now, I'm not saying that Wahoo McDaniel didn't draw his share of the money.
Right.
But then when they separated, Ric Flair drew anyway. And also Ricky Steamboat came in and drew mega money with Ric Flair. But Ric Flair was drawing anyway. In other words, but Ricky Steamboat brought it to new heights. But the man was over, okay? And he was over before I got there.
Right.
And I was just in awe of him. I just could not believe that this guy was this great. And he'd flop his hair around and this and that. He'd bring these $10 million robes into the dressing room and he'd act like he found them.
Huh.
You know, he's just a fun person. His dressing room was always a happy one. There was, on the other hand, there was the Andersons. They would come into the dressing room already with the excuses. And by say they, when I say they, I mean Ole. Gene wouldn't say anything. Gene was nondescript.
Right.
Gene just shook his head and smoked cigarettes and didn't say much except, hey, thank you very much. Dynamite Jack Evans did a imitation of Gene, the late Gene Anderson, God keep his soul. And Gene Anderson is an opera singer. Neely Pagliacci.
I was actually going to ask you about Ole later on in the interview because he had some not so nice things to say about you and your family.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, I'll bring
Such
it up.
a wonderful man. You would think that he was with the milk of human kindness by the quart in every vein. Well, what happened? Ole Anderson doesn't like me, and for very good reason.
You can tell the story now since we're on it.
Well, I'm on a roll, baby.
Okay.
And a man my age, don't stop him when he's on a roll. He would always be with the excuses. Well, we're not going to draw because. And he would have a new one every time he came in. And he was very creative. It's not going to be too good tonight because. And the time that got me is when Jimmy Carter won the presidential election. Evidently, it was a Tuesday in November.
Huh.
And he says, we're not going to draw because, the presidential election. Well, that's all well and good. That sounds like a pretty good excuse. But then I go to the Charlotte YMCA and see some of the other boys that were in the other towns. How did you guys do? Sold out, Ric Flair. And I thought, so on Wednesday, he said, well, we're not going to do very well because blah, blah, blah. So I said, well, last night you didn't draw because of the presidential elections. But Ric Flair, they must not have voted very much in his precinct. Because everybody came to the matches.
Right.
Well, the truth was, and plus, his dressing room was like a negative powder. And these guys, may I speak to you about philosophy of wrestling? Because everybody thinks they're a reincarnated Lou Thez. Everybody, all these old timers, they say, and even the new timers, some of them, they go, it's about wrestling. Remember, it says wrestling on the marquee. Remember, wrestling on the marquee. What does this say?
All right, video.
Okay, no wrestling on the marquee. How do you guys stay in business without wrestling on the marquee? Well, wrestling on the marquee doesn't mean anything. May I say that? And let me prove it. In high school, in college, and at the Olympic level, they have wrestling on the marquee, and it's real. And guess what else it is? Real boring. And real lousy tickets sold. And what's the most important? Why is Ric Flair Ric Flair? Because of the people. Now you can show it on TV. Does that mean they're going to buy tickets? No. Evidently, he caused some type of commotion. Now Ole Anderson would knock Ric Flair and then kiss his ass to his face. He said that all Ric Flair does is try to entertain the people. And he said his proof of that was when he was introduced that 20% or 30% of the audience was actually applauding him and everybody else was booing. I mean, I'm sorry, the opposite. I'm a little older.
Right.
And I'm sleep deprived because I believe in 10 hours of sleep a night and 14 hours of relaxation, and I'm just not getting it right now because we're in Boston and I live in Florida. So it says because he has some of the audience cheering him means he's ineffective as a heel. And that's when he said, now the Andersons, when we wrestle, it's all boos. So I said, well, how do you get any reaction out of an empty chair anyway? Oh, was he angry at me? That didn't get over.
Right.
Okay? So, but I couldn't stand it anymore because I liked Ric Flair. I'm sorry. Maybe you don't. I do. And there is some jealousy involved. And please, if I were the jealous type, I probably would have eaten a hole through my own liver by now because the Macho Man's my brother. And everybody that calls me up is trying to, butter me up to get to them. You see what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I'm okay with it because I've done very well, whatever. I can handle it. And, I mean, he's not that way. He doesn't think about Jay Leno having a better job than him.
Right.
In other words, I don't want to be an ungrateful person with 2 loaves of bread under each arm, complaining that I'm starving to death. Because I had beautiful memories in the business, and that's a lot more than people of greater ability, got to have. But back to Ole, he's very angry at me because, and then we started in on each other. He gave me that whole lecture. It says wrestling on the marquee, and Ric Flair's just an entertainer. I said, I went outside, and it does say wrestling on the marquee, but it says tickets at the tickets. Tickets, tickets at the box office. And with the Andersons, all we have is excuses, but we have so many empty seats. And he said, we drew money in this territory, blah, 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 blah. He's talking about something that happened many, many years ago, and he's elevating himself and this is only because of this and that and this and that. And then he blamed whoever his opponent was, Bravo and Woods. Well, what happens is Ric Flair worked with Bravo and Woods sometime, and they still drew a sellout. Huh. And when I say a sellout, let me go back. There's all kinds of sellouts. There's SRO sellouts, standing room only means, and then there's other sellouts where the fireman says, no more. You've got no more tickets. You see what I mean? There's all different. When you hear about a sellout, there's all different types. A full house, that means you can still have a couple hundred more walk in.
Right.
Anyway, so what happened, and this is why he really doesn't like me. 2 reasons. Once we started getting on each other, it started getting a little bit heated. Okay? And Ole's a smart guy, and he's, he can present himself very well. And this is no idiot. However, my validation was, where's the audience? And that's the running gag we had. And here's what happened. We're in Spartanburg in front of a record low. And we're in a battle royal. My brother's there, Macho Man, but he only weighed 190. And Bravo and Woods and a bunch of guys and the Andersons, and they've had enough of me. So Gene Anderson, who I had never had any trouble with, and he was helping George Scott with the book.
Right.
Ole says, we're going to teach you a lesson tonight. Oh. So Gene gets in the ring with me, and after we get everybody, and everybody's watching, and I don't know what's going on. A little slow for a genius. He locks up real stiff with me. He gets behind me. He picks me up, takes me down, throws me on my belly. And I knew what was going on then. So I got up to my hands and knees, and I sat out, switched him, got him in the head and arm lever in the deep waist, and pinned him. Now, I like Gene. That's why I didn't put the sugar on him, which is a submission hold. I just thought it was good enough to pin him and to keep him down for a ridiculous amount of time.
Right.
Okay?
So it wasn't the planned finish?
No, this was a battle royal.
Oh,
this is a battle royal.
Yeah.
I mean, it was...
Obviously.
Even a great battle royal is mostly scrambled eggs, especially when there's so many people in the ring. So now, Bravo and Woods are laughing their butts off and making fun of Gene, who's underneath me.
Right.
And, I've never had any trouble with Gene, but if you want to have a shoot with me, tell me first, And then my brother's loving it. And then Randy says, Ole, you got to try it. My brother's on a roll here. Come on. And I let Gene up, and Ole just puts his head down. Well, what I found out later was that Gene was the tougher of the 2 Andersons. And what they still don't know was, and I may as well let you know, my brother was the tougher of the 2 Poffos. And how do I know that? By countless shoots. Now, my only chance to get even with my brother is I'll wait about 35 years, 40, and stand on his oxygen hose. Maybe then I'll get my revenge. But in the meantime, yes, he's better than me, at that type of thing. So then our lives became like murder because they were what I'd call poor sportsmanship.
Right.
So then he gets on me about my dubious sexuality. started calling me a fag. Fag this, fag that, fag this. And I just took it like a man. Like a man. So I didn't, I'm not a homosexual, but I'm not homophobic either.
Right.
And I'm not adverse to using effeminate gimmicks in order to draw money, because I was in business to make money. So I was thinking to myself, what would an intelligent man do? When confronted with this fact that here's this big bully that won't wrestle me, acts like a tough guy, and he's going on and on about me being a fag, or a politically correct homosexual, or let's say not the most masculine of his gender, even though he won't wrestle me. Well, I thought, what would an intelligent man do? And then I did the opposite. Okay, here's what I did. I noticed that even though he was a married with children type guy, that he had a girl in every port. Okay? Now, in those days, I was like 21, 22 years old. I didn't have a girl in every port. I was going through them like Scott towels. You see what I mean?
Right.
I was interested in meeting new people. And that's part of the fun of wrestling is, did you know that there are women of easy virtue? And they were willing to trade favors for getting their picture taken with you. And I always treated these groupies very well. I mean, I try to leave them happier than when I met them. Some of the guys would put them halcyon, or now it would be roofies, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Shave their heads, shave their eyebrows, defecate on them, and I never got the idea of that. I was always very grateful for whatever attention I could get. So in the towns that Ole wasn't, one by one, I would accept the favors of his girls. And then it got around. Okay? So then Ole confronts me finally. And if he liked me at all before then, he didn't like me now.
Right.
I mean, it's bad enough that when being shot upon, here we are, shoot interview, that, pardon me for defending myself against Gene Anderson, but if you saw pictures of Gene Anderson, I wasn't surprised when he died. He was a very unhealthy man. He had a bloated stomach. It was hard as a rock, but that's an indication of ill health. He also had puffy under his eyes, and he just didn't look well after any of his matches, and he smoked. So Ole finally confronts me, and Ole should have done this alone with him and I. And he says, "Right, Poffo, how do you like my used pussy?" And I said, "Well, after you get past the part that's used, it's not bad." Well, turns out Ole has a big mouth and a small dick. And that's probably why he compensates by being aggressive and being a bully. But the thing is, when I offered him to, after the defeat of his synthetic brother Gene, I said, "Let's go." He wouldn't. He dropped his head. So, I'm saying, no, I'm not a homosexual. I don't always use my noodle, as my grandfather used to say. And perhaps my mouth was a little bit too big. Maybe I should have respected my elders. But I found being in the dressing room with Ole Anderson excruciatingly boring. And I also liked Ric Flair so much. And I was so respectful of him and so grateful that I still have the money that he drew. My end of it, which was much less. But don't forget, in my bucket, there is a bottom. There's no hole in my bucket. So whatever I make, even with an eyedropper, I still have today.
Right.
So, in other words, but that's another subject, because a lot of the boys live like there's no tomorrow. And for some of them, there wasn't a tomorrow. So maybe their philosophy worked well for them. But I believe, like Thomas Jefferson said, plan ahead like you're going to live 100 years, but live like there's no tomorrow. So in other words, either way, you're covered. But I was young, stupid, as it turned out. And I'm sure I could have done better to get along with Ole. But the thing is, I found it just nauseating in the dressing room with him.
Right.
And I couldn't believe that he would actually knock Ric Flair and then kiss his ass.
Right.
I mean, that's just intolerable.
I heard from a couple people that he didn't even want to put the title on Ric Flair at one point when he was booking.
See, I didn't know Ric Flair at that time. He didn't get the title till much later.
Right.
But what I had heard was that he didn't think he deserved the title, and he certainly did. He is championship material. I mean, the way he carried himself, the way he walked and talked, and how nice he was to people. He was a fun person. Have you ever met him?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just he's a lot more fun than my dinner with Ole.
Now, from Charlotte area, you wound up. I guess your father started running an outlaw promotion a little bit after this.
Yeah, we'll get back to that in a minute.
Okay.
I think I missed my point. It says wrestling on the marquee. Actually, what it is, and Vince McMahon, that's why he's so brilliant. Entertainment. Because if it were wrestling, why is wrestling what it is? Because of you, the consumer. You made it what it is today, and stop complaining. Evidently, by your attendance, the buildings are packed, the Nielsen ratings and all that. You know, like in the Olympics, this has been an Olympic year. How much wrestling did you see? None. Because the Nielsen ratings are so smart, they're so finicky, they're so persnickety that they know exactly, they know when you've been sleeping, they know when you're awake, they know when you're turning in. And notice that women's gymnastics gets all the play. It's because of these are girls that it's illegal to go to bed with, and yet they're dressed scantily, and you can see everything. And, you know, it's like they're just dressed for modesty and, you know, and support. and I guess people like to watch women's gymnastics with just one hand. I can only assume that. You know, but when it got to wrestling, they only glimpse it because they know that the ratings are dead. And the wrestling has an aficionado audience. I love wrestling, and I can't even watch it because it's a lot of huff puff.
Right.
You know, the boys are tired, and I mean, it's great. I met Dan Gable. I flipped. My ex-wife was with me, and who was that? Well, that was the greatest wrestler that ever lived. She says, well, you can beat him. And I said, he could snap both my arms off and give me a procto. And I thank him,
Right.
you know, for only doing that. Because when he weighed 145 in 1972, he could beat his whole team except Chris Taylor. In other words, he could beat everybody heavier.
Right.
Well, Chris Taylor, I mean,
400 pounds.
Yeah, he was a walking water pit.
Right.
So that's not fair. That wasn't even wrestling. That was obese.
Right.
So anyway, what I was getting at was, if I get nothing across in the shoot interview, please hear this. It may say wrestling on the marquee, but it says tickets. And the most important ingredient in wrestling is the fans. No show, no dough. We've got to please them. I say we. I mean, no longer we. They have to please you. And you will vote by your attendance and your Nielsen ratings whether or not that person is worth it. Now, here's the thing about Ole that I didn't say. First of all, I respect him in several ways. He knew the value of a dollar. He was a very hardworking man. Him and Gene had an excellent team. You know, they had a rule in Charlotte that the heels had to hang around because in case there was a riot, we had to be there to help. Mm. Well, even though he didn't draw money, and I can validate that, he was very hardworking. He worked his ass off, him and Gene both. They organized the matches very well. They got a lot out of Woods and Bravo, and I'd say they were excellent workers. However, when you knock Ric Flair, you are on dangerously thin ice. And I'm going to have to say that, you know, you don't draw, you're jealous. And Ric Flair understood, and he was legitimate, and he was a wrestler, and he's an athlete, but everybody was black and white, and he was in living color. And he set fire to the ring. He was more fun. And Roddy Piper had that, and my brother had that. And me, I had it sometimes because my gimmick was so good, it made up for my work. In other words, a great gimmick. Let's say I want to make it in this business. How am I going to make more money? As a great worker or have an excellent gimmick?
Gimmick.
And if my work's good enough to just get by, it's my gimmick that's going to make me rich.
Right.
Okay? Now, but I had some problems. When I did the gimmick, the people loved it, and the boys were, and then finally and then I'll tell you something too. We need variety in the business. And I was like a one-joke worker. I worked that same joke.
Huh.
Okay? I'm effeminate. I was only manly when your back was turned.
Right.
I was cowardly. I didn't like any, if I got a hangnail, I would complain to the referee, you know. And I imagine it got, you know, the joke got over, but it got old too. And maybe I didn't have that staying power than if I had been a great worker. But anyway, back to Ole. I apologize. I apologize that you are a miserable old man. Now, you got to get old, and I'm getting older too, and I hope I get it even much older. And if you ever see me drive, you'd be amazed how I live this long, you know, because I'm the person they invented the finger for, you know. And when I was in New York, I thought my name was your mother. So you've got to get old, but you don't have to get Ole. Okay?
We were talking a little bit about Portland when you were up there. Who were some other guys that were in that territory?
Well, when I got there, the bottom had just dropped because Buddy Rose went to San Francisco, and that guy was over.
Right.
I mean, say what you will about him. Every time he came back for a weekend or a week, he would draw sellouts every time he came. I swear. I promise you that. I guess Ole wouldn't have liked him either, right? But he came in and did business, and then Roddy Piper came in with Tim Brooks,
right.
Taylor Brooks,
Mm-hmm.
and that gave a shot of adrenaline into the territory because they had Dr. Hiro Ota, which is like the 1 millionth Japanese wrestler they've ever had. You know, they're all sneaky and they all sinister and they throw salt in your face. And, you know, the people had seen that and they weren't ready to buy any more tickets for it. But Piper came in with those bagpipes and, man, he was good.
What were your initial impressions of him as a person?
Oh, please. I was so happy. And I just come from, I almost got married to a girl in Nova Scotia. No, I'm sorry. I'm very sleepy. I only had a couple hours sleep. But, she was in Prince Edward Island, okay? And she played the piano, she played the guitar, and she played the bagpipes. And she was from the farm, and I just fell in love with her. And then I was really homesick, and I kind of like fell in love with her, and I felt like I didn't realize it until I left how much I missed her. And then I would never see her again because when I came back to the Maritimes 5 years later, I found out she was married with children, you see. So, but I mean, she was a breath of fresh air. And then I was so miserable without her. And then I saw Roddy Piper, he's playing the bagpipes and he's Scottish and this and that. Well, she was Scottish too. So I went, bam. So I instantly liked him. Plus, he was such a fun person in the dressing room. And then I would wrestle him and I did a job for him. In other words, put him over. He got his hand raised. And of course, I would mean more because of being with him than it would if I had just beat somebody. You know, if I defeated Dr. Hiro Oda.
Right.
Neither one of us would get over.
He gave you a good run, basically.
He was so great that anybody in the ring with him or even the referee got over. Plus, the people in the audience got over. He was that good.
Wow.
He was so much fun and entertainment. He gave the people too much for their money. And it hurt him. I mean, here's a guy with all these injuries throwing his body every which way. See, I'm a bit of a freak in the business because I never did anything I couldn't do. And, well, how many people do you know that put 21 years into wrestling without one injury at all? Not an injury. And by that I mean chronic injuries. I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't get my feelings hurt or somebody stepped on my toe, but I'm saying, like, I can do a move right now that no wrestler can do. I can make this and I can do that. And everybody else is going like this and like that. I mean, Ken Patera, he's the second strongest man in the world in 1972. And, you know, he'll tell you himself, he's like a a Cadillac with 500,000 miles on it. You know, so I think some of the reason is that I was a gymnast.
I was going to ask you that, yeah.
And that I lifted weights, but never heavy. I don't lift heavy weights because heavy weights is the best and the worst thing for you. It's the best thing for your muscles. It's the worst thing for your joints. And after you ruin your joints, they don't give you new joints. That's why all these wrestlers getting artificial hips, artificial knees, and all this stuff. You know, I don't need it because I never lifted heavy weights and I never did anything in the ring that I couldn't do. So, and plus, when I wrestled Hulk Hogan on NBC, he body slammed me over the top rope. Well, I am a gymnast. And for me, that's a dismount off the high bar. In other words, I knew I could do it unless he would have muscled me so I couldn't grab the top rope. Well, if I couldn't have grabbed the top rope, then I don't know what would have happened to me. But since I had the top rope, one under and one over, it became a gymnastic trick. I landed right on my feet, and then I collapsed. And everybody said, "Whoa, what a bump." Well, no, I'm good.
Huh.
You know, it's all that gymnastic training paid off.
Now, from Portland, you went down with your father and Randy, and you started up your own company.
Yes.
Which was considered an outlaw promotion down near Memphis, was it?
See, that word outlaw.
Lexington,
Kentucky.
Right.
You know, it's funny you should say outlaw. Let me explain the definition of outlaw. That's when you rob the train with guns and a mask. Now, when Domino's Pizza is in town and Chicago Pizza goes right next door, that's not an outlaw promotion. That's the American way.
It's competition.
Competition, not opposition, competition. There you are. And it was a little bit communist, the way the territories were set up in the past, where we had to obey those strict lines. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the NWA sticker of approval, and a champion wouldn't come to your town, and you wouldn't have the credibility that is enjoyed only by the NWA, you know, and the people would be hypnotized into thinking that that was the only way to go. Well, the NWA fell apart because without money, it's about this is a cash flow business. It's not wrestling on the marquee, no matter what you call it. They have to draw money in order to pay the boys, and the promoters have to have something called profit. Now, let me anticipate your next three questions. Having had my own entrepreneurship in partnership with my family, I have a different vantage point than every other wrestler that's going to sit in this chair. Okay, you've got wrestlers that say, "Look at what you've done to us." Well, if you took steroids, don't blame Vince McMahon. I mean, please. You're 21 years old, did you take steroids? Well, then look in the mirror and say, "Self, you're an idiot." Or you're a whore. You traded something for something. Quid pro quo. You knew the warning label was there. I mean, are we together on this? That you are responsible for the consequences of whatever actions that you made in your life. Outlaw promotion, that suggests that it was against the law. No, this is well within the law to invest your money wisely or stupidly and succeed or fail in whatever business or endeavor that you choose. In our case, it was the wrestling business, the entertainment business, whatever you call it. It was the ticket business. We were selling tickets. And if our show was good enough, they'd come back. And if it wasn't, they wouldn't. So it's the same business as the other guys were doing, except we were known as the Outlaws. Now, when these wrestlers get together and they say, "We want a union," well, let me be the first to say I don't want to join your union. Because, this is what happened in America. I mean, we have unions, don't we? And let's just take one business, the automobile business. You had General Motors, you had Ford, you had Chrysler. These are the big three. That's all they had. That was the NWA. We didn't intrude on each other. Then we had a thing called the union. And then we had a little four-letter word called M-O-R-E, more. I want more. Give me more. I'm a worker. We are together. Together we are powerful. I want more. That's what a union does. Next thing you know, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, they said, "Okay, you can have more. We'll just add it on to the cost by the consumer. Let the cost of the car go up." In other words, they raise ticket prices in order to,
Right.
hey, baseball, football, every major sport, you know. Okay, let me get to the point because I'm sure you're falling asleep here. Because I'm almost doing it. Okay. Okay. Next thing you know, Japan and Germany are building better cars than the United States. Because in Japan, they got people that work for rice. And they're able to put together a better car because in German people are more quality oriented, and so is Japan. So anyway, in other words, the rest of the story is the boys say the promoters are a bunch of thieves. Well, I could give you a whole list of wrestlers that died broke. I mean, promoters that died broke too. Mm-hmm. In other words, wrestlers died broke and promoters died broke. So they're all dying broke. So how could they be thieves? You know, you're an independent contractor. I never told you what I would pay you. I give you whatever I thought was fair or whatever I thought you would take without leaving. And then everybody got mad at Vince McMahon because he rated talent. Well, that's un-American. Well, actually it is. That's called supply and demand. That's called, what is your own, if you're a wrestler and you're not happy with what you're making, or let's say you are happy. In other words, hey, come to the World Wrestling Federation. Well, I'm loyal to XYZ. I'm going to stay here and live and die with this guy. Well, I'll pay you more. Okay, I'll go. You see what I mean?
Right.
In other words, where money lies, honor dies, or loyalty dies, or anything else. In other words, if the price is right, I'll be there tonight. No, absolutely not nothing doing. Well, how about for this much? Okay. In other words, they unlock the supply and demand has to do with how much. And sometimes that's not an intelligent decision, it's an emotional one. Okay? But, yeah, go back to your question, we were an outlaw organization.
What roadblocks did you guys go through?
Well, the road to success is always under construction. Naturally, I try to blot it out of my mind. It was the longest, most miserable 7 years of my life. Huh. And then it was also at the time where I met my wife, who pretended to be a lift and turned out to be a load. And finally, we had a divorce where she was an unload. Huh. And now I am free and happy and made a vow to never, ever walk down that aisle again. Because I've seen the other side of the mountain, and it's paved with, you know what.
Right. Now,
who were the main guys against you? Was it Lawler and Jarrett? Did you say you were infringing mainly on them because of the territory you were there, or was that the main? Were you like the main competition for them?
Well, they were living in Nashville and Memphis, and we were living in Lexington. So we were also going into Southern Illinois. We're going into a virgin land of West Virginia, where some of the children had eyes a little too close together because the gene pool wasn't so deep, because they went to family reunions looking for babes. Okay. And, we traveled a lot. We worked very hard. I was in charge of the photography, the writing, can you believe it? Right. the programs and everything. I made sure the picture business was running efficiently.
The gimmick table, you mean?
The gimmick table? Right. Yeah, I got plenty of gimmicks. I'm a gimmick man. Very little substance. Yeah, go on. I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
No.
I was winding it down.
No.
But who was your Lawler? Who was the main people against you when you were starting up?
Well, Randy has an opinion on himself that he can beat up everybody in the world, and if not, he'll die trying. And that's really what he's made of. He's got that in him. So the first thing he would do is get on their television and threaten their top people. You see what I mean? Did you not know that?
No. I heard something. I heard there was something with there was
he would issue the
rival promoter.
Right. Yeah, he even did that lately to Hulk Hogan.
Right.
And he even went so far as to go to the St. Pete Children's Hospital, where he's donated lots of time and money, and he, would make it ridiculous for Hulk Hogan not to accept his challenge. Well, he's done that to everybody, and nobody's ever accepted his challenge. Hulk, everybody from, the top boys were Lawler and Dundee and
Didn't Dundee do something? Was it Dundee who like got in a fight? Yeah. I heard he like did. Somebody showed up at one of the shows, or I wasn't sure.
no, actually, it
The
was
whole story.
See, what I got out of it was in Nashville at a gym in the parking lot, and Randy said, "Hello, Bill," and then bam, sucker punched him, and then one thing led to another, and police were brought in, and this and that, and I at the time was with my girlfriend, who was to become my wife. I was in Knoxville at the World Fair, enjoying my day with a fellow named Tony Falk and a wrestler named El Brazzero, my wife, my girlfriend and I, and we were not knowing that I was I thought the World Fair was a little disappointing because it wasn't as good as Six Flags Over Georgia or Cedar Point.
Right.
You see what I mean? I'm into the rides.
Right.
And they had some rides, but not great.
Right.
Okay. So what I didn't know was that even though I was a little disappointed with the World Fair, which sounds on paper like it'd be more fun than an amusement park, actually wasn't. I didn't know at the time that I bet I'd be better off at a fair than, rolling around with Bill Dundee. Randy broke his cheekbone or something, and then they supposedly made up and kissed and became friends. But when I was working with Bill Watts, I was in Bill Watts' territory in 1983, right after I had 83 and 84. That's when my daughter was born, Megan, and she's now 20. So time flies, huh? So then I was with Ernie Ladd as the booker. They were going to turn me heel because I speak Spanish. And I was going to insult the Mexicans and everything. And they had a big place for me working angles with the great Magnum TA. And I felt so terrible. What the world missed one of the greatest workers and because he drove a little too fast on a wet road with a Porsche.
Right.
I don't know. That's another heartbreak, and he was great. Trust me on that one. Anyway, then they changed bookers.
Dundee came in?
Dundee came in and fired about 10 people, and I was one of them.
And then I heard he brought in all the Memphis guys.
And you know something? May I say this on Bill Dundee's... at the time, they had a lot of 300-pound paralyzed heels. Now, I love Nikolai Volkov, not the one with the Iron Sheik. I mean, very nice person. But I was in the car with Grizzly Smith, and George Weinross was riding with me, and he says, do you think we're going to pop the territory? And Grizzly says, yep, it just depends when Nikolai's going to get over. And I thought to myself, I shouldn't say anything, but that wouldn't be me, would it? I said, well, if we're waiting for Nikolai to get over, I think we're in for quite a long, miserable time. So, okay, Bill Dundee, fired me.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened was I was going to hang around anyway because I didn't want to move my wife, who was pregnant with my daughter. So we're going to stay in town anyway. But then Tom Zink leaves without his notice, and I got all of his bookings. So that was excellent. Right. I mean, let me just tell you this. Bill Dundee took the book, cut me, and brought in the Memphis guys, but that's only part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
He popped the territory.
Right.
Because we were dying of stagnation, you understand? I mean, the people didn't want the product, and they had seen it to death, and it was on the downs. He brought in Terry Taylor. He got over like $20 million. That guy got over.
Right.
People don't like him. People knock him. People are jealous. That guy got over. He also brought in Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey with Jim Cornette. They got over like $50 million. And then they worked with Morton and Gibson. And they got over like $100 million. Now, please, I know I got cut from the team. And I know that I didn't enjoy some of the big payoffs that were about to happen. But I refuse to put myself in the same situation as an Ole Anderson and say, it's because they're not sticking to wrestling and this and that and making excuses. No, Bill Dundee is brilliant. He changed Bill Watts' territory from, and another guy brilliant is Bill Watts. I mean, I have to say that, and what a man he is. He goes in the dressing room and says, and if you make a suggestion and this and that, or you say, hey, I got who's great on a payoff or whatever,
Right.
you say, well, if you don't like it, buy your own territory. I mean,
I've heard that before.
I dare you to go up to that guy and talk about something because he's got it here and he's got it here. And there's very few places he doesn't have it.
Right.
And also, his territory was excellent. And it was designed for profitability. And Jim Duggan made a fortune there. Junkyard Dog was making $150,000 when they weren't making it. Now, as I was leaving on May 28th, the day before my daughter was born in 1984, they booked me in Dallas. And I worked with Gino Hernandez. Are you familiar with him?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, he's one of the list of long names of people that have died early. In his case, it was some type of heroin, whatever.
Right.
What difference does it make? You know, it's I call it all suicide. Whether you meant to or didn't mean to, you know damn well if you read the label that you're not supposed to do this with that. Okay, we get in there in Fort Worth, Texas, on TV. I'm told to go 30 minutes with some guy I never heard of. I had heard of him, but I never met him.
Right.
And I'm going to lose 2 straight falls. Well, I told you that as a babyface, I could be led if the heel was wise enough to lead me well. This guy, the late, great Gino Hernandez, he took me and we tore the house down. Now, the house is still standing unless the wreckers came. Maybe I exaggerated, right? I mean, let's put it this way. We got the fans all worked up. One guy even got so upset he tore up his program, and the other guy left for popcorn. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but may I say that I was very proud of the match, and I give all the credit to Gino Hernandez, the heel that led this 5 and made him a 10 for the evening. Well, when I got back to the dressing room, the boys were thanking me and congratulating me. What a match. Everybody was giving me positive reinforcement. And Bronco Lubitsch, who was my father's manager in the early days, in the days that my father enjoyed the greatest 6 years of his life, was Bronco Lubitsch was his manager, who was then the elderly referee for World Class Wrestling. Right. Bronco came up to me. And I love Bronco, man, because I remember when I had my tonsils taken out and then followed by I had a hernia operation, you know, he gave me a good pep talk and he always took the time with me and he was such a gentleman, such a nice man. He says, Lanny, that was fantastic. The Von Erichs love you. They want you, but there's only one problem. We're full. But he introduced me to the booker. And his name was Ken Mantell. Hello, Ken, this is Lanny Poffo. He says, Lanny, you were great. We want you, but we're full. We don't have a position for you. We're going to wait for the right moment to bring you in. We're going to have a whole new coming in January. And at that time, Dallas was the greatest territory in the world. Short trips, most money. I'd gotten off of Bill Watts' territory when you made $3,000 a week. Not dollars, miles.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, and you keep driving to those towns. So anyway, and I never had the advantage of taking uppers and downers, so I did it all on enthusiasm, which I was starting to lose. So anyway, let's see, where was I? I was, May 28th. Then I go back to Shreveport. My daughter's born, and I'm thinking, then I went back to. We were still running towns and were working for Jarrett. My brother had drawn big money with Jerry Lawler, and everybody was getting along swimmingly.
Right.
From outlaws to in-laws now. You know, instead of on the outside pissing in, we're now on the inside pissing out. Okay, we're all getting together, and then. But I knew January 1st. I was going to call Ken Mantell because he loves me. He loves me. He knew that I was it. The next guy to make it all happen. So January 1st, I call. And he sounds like he's high. And it's past 12 o'clock noon. I mean, I'm sorry, but the rest of us are up.
Right.
I said, this is Lanny Poffo. You told me to call January 1st, and here it is. January 1st, 1985. And he says, huh? I said, yeah, I wrestled Gino Hernandez in Fort Worth. You liked the match, and you wanted me to join World Class Wrestling. And he says, I said, excuse me. I apologize for calling you at your home. I know it must be frustrating when a mark has your phone number. I apologize, and I wish you the best of luck.
Wow.
Click. I mean, he didn't remember me from May 28th, and here it is January 1st. Now, I don't know if he was A, on drugs, or B, had actually forgotten me. You know, I've got one of those faces that's easy to forget. Who knows? But I was very disappointed. But in wrestling, as in life, you are promised more things than you get. Now, a month later, who comes into the territory of Memphis but PYT? Coco Beware, Norvell Austin.
Yeah.
And Coco Beware, say what you want about him, he's a talented little guy. Explosively built. Tougher than shoe leather. And, well, you can tell the way he's built, and he's got a vertical leap. And he also never lies about anything, even when he's putting himself over, which he does a lot of. You know, he's actually very talented. Is he as good as he says he is? Well, good for him for thinking so. Okay? But I told him what happened. I said, you know, gee, I'm so excited to go to Dallas. And then I call Ken Mantell, he doesn't even remember me. He said, well, when was this? I said, January 1st. He said, man, you would have starved to death. I said, Dallas was the greatest territory in the world. It was the greatest territory in the world. Here's what happened. Remember when David Von Erich died in Japan and they covered up the suicide and said it was just pills and liquor like everybody else was dying of? You know, and he brought a lot of pills, definitely afraid he would run out because when you're in Japan, it's hard to get pills. When you're in France, it's very easy, by the way. Pharmacy, you know, and they'll just give you anything you want if you've got the cash. So, what had happened? And I got this story verified by many people. I mean, imagine this. They give, because David Von Erich died in Japan, the fans, and they sold out everywhere, man. I mean, the Von Erichs were the hottest thing in the world. They had the best television. They give them a horseshoe of yellow roses. The money, the time, the love that went into that horseshoe, it was enormous. And they surprised the surviving brothers with this beautiful horseshoe. And his gimmick was he wore a yellow rose and he threw it to the people. The people went wild. They presented this horseshoe of roses to the Von Erichs, who were totally inebriated with God knows what. And they bring this in their Lincoln Continental, and they get about a mile out of town, and they threw it into the sewer. And the fans saw it. Okay? All the love that had gone into for these ingrates. So the fans, they brought the yellow roses back. They said they threw it away. They're crying. They're upset.
Right.
They're hurt. Their feelings are hurt. One of the mistakes that wrestlers make is they think that marks are stupid. Marks are not stupid. As a matter of fact, you know who's really stupid? The people in the ring. You know, the people that Mark's paid to see. They're the dumbest ones of all because they have this idea that they're above it. They are not above it. They are right in it. Okay? So, I mean, when you point a finger, there's three fingers pointing at yourself. What happened was, it made it United Press International that the Von Erichs had done this. Word of mouth. It was a small town in Texas that used to draw sellouts. Well, immediately, in one day, the people boycotted all world-class wrestling. Don't mess with Texas. See what I mean? And the Von Erichs, they went down and stayed down, and one by one, all but one commit suicide. And the only one still existing is Kevin, and from what I hear, he doesn't even know it. He's just walking around completely sedated. Now, it's not for me to judge, But I'm hoping that whoever bought this interview is A, entertained, B, feels that he doesn't want a refund, but C, and most importantly, please, for the love of God, don't do what those before you have done. Learn from that and walk that straight and narrow, please. I mean, if that's what I'm dedicating the next 30 years of my life to. I figure I'm about to hit in, a couple months, I'm going to be 50. What do I want to do with my life? Well, I want to help the children, start them young, and teach them that a life of debauchery is not for a human being, and it's destroying every life that's gone before. Let's learn from Janis Joplin. Let's not just follow in her footsteps. As a singer, yeah, okay, Chris Christopherson, fine. I don't know how we're going to do a segue here, but I insist that eventually, after we're done talking about wrestling, I can give a little pontification because I'm dedicating my life to it. My daughter doesn't smoke. That validates me as a very good role model and a very good influence. She never even considered such a thing. And everybody's looking for leadership. Where it's absent in the home, that's where I'm stepping in. I'm going to go in there, and I'm Lanny the non-smoking dad. My daughter knows that if she started smoking, she'd never get a moment's peace, because cigarettes is not only the leading cause of preventable death, it also leads to other things that's going to make your life spiral downward until it plops. And if you want to be all you can be, you're going to have to live by a couple of rules. If it feels good, it might be bad for you. If you feel bad in the morning, you maybe shouldn't do it tonight.
Right. I want to backtrack a little bit. Before you went to Memphis and you're in your father's territory, what are your memories of Elizabeth? She was your announcer.
Oh, yes.
How did she come out? She come about? Who founded her?
Oh,
she was going out with somebody first, right?
No.
No, okay.
Well, I don't know her past. I don't want to dig that up out of the trenches, But let's see. I met her as she was in Sinte Sports Center in Lexington, Kentucky, where the boys worked out.
Right.
And she was behind the booth. And, when you checked in, she could give you the towels, and I thought she was gorgeous. And Randy asked her out, and the Macho Man got a date with Elizabeth, and that's how it started. Now, they were married about, December 31st, 1984.
Mm.
And then Randy got a break in New York in June, 15th, 1985. So he's already married about 6 months. And now, led down the aisle by his manager, Elizabeth. Bum, 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 dun, 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 bum, bum. Howard Finkel was phenomenal. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you about her, and she was never really. Was she a fan of the business, or was it something that?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay, you guys basically just taught her the business, and Randy put her.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, also, before we talked a little bit about your brief stint in Memphis, or actually it wasn't that brief. You and your brother went in there. Was it hard to actually go into the locker room for the first time after all the I guess the controversy with you and your promotion?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't. I'm not that sensitive. It was harder to go into any locker room that Ole Anderson was in. I didn't find anything else as negative as that.
What are some of your memories of your matches with the Rock and Roll Express?
Well, they were fantastic, and particularly Morton, the way he sold, and the way he would fight for his comeback and fight for that tag. That was a lot of times I felt that I was just holding the rope and watching them go. Because you couldn't have ruined that match no matter who was in the corner. They were excellent and they were phenomenal, and they were very nice people.
Do you see yourself as an innovator of table breaking? Because you guys did the famous pile driver spot, which is still talked about today.
Okay, in a word, no. Okay, I'm not an innovator of table breaking.
All right.
I am an innovator of holding the rope and watching my brother innovate table breaking. Okay, I was safely in my corner.
Right.
And I said, wow, these guys are good. And I said, if I were a fan, I bet I spent money on something worthwhile. He took that Ricky Morton up, and they've played this to death.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew that table was going to break either, you see, because these things you can't call. But I give credit to both men for having the spheres of the temerity, or whatever you want to call it, to take a chance like that. And I guess that was when hardcore was born.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your early memories of working Lawler?
Lawler was fantastic. He's a ring general. He made me look good. He was, I don't knock success. I also think he's an excellent commentator. Of course, WWE, all their announcers are great. You know, we were in a thing today. Somebody asked me, you know, we had a Q&A thing earlier and you were there. Somebody asked me if I could be an announcer. Probably yes, but I don't think I would add to it because I think the WWE either has the best announcers or they'll get them. You know, I remember back when Vince was just starting out, Vince Jr., he actually made an offer to Howard Cosell.
Wow.
You know, and that's, in other words, nothing's going to stop him from putting the best ingredients on the microphone or in the ring.
What advice did your dad give you before you went up to New York?
He said, get as much rest as you can because he knows it's going to be a horrible schedule.
Right.
You know, and I tried to get in bed in time to see David Letterman.
What were your initial impressions of Vince when you first met him? And how did you actually wind up there? Is it true your brother went in first?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
we were there the same day.
I mean, right, but you want to tell the story of how your brother was
Okay.
spotted?
This is how my brother was spotted, okay?
It's an interesting story.
You think so? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'll make it as dull as I can. Okay. Okay, how was my brother spotted? Remember Dr. D, David Schultz?
Yes.
Well, he slapped John Stossel in 2020 and blah, 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 got himself in all kinds of trouble, got himself fired, okay, from WWF. And then he goes to Memphis, and they team him up with the number one heel, which is the Macho Man Randy Savage. And they make an interview together and have a match and make an interview. And in the interview, Dr. D. David Schultz vents. He does a shoot interview against Hulk Hogan, Vince McMahon, the WWF. He's knocking everybody. Bam, 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 bam. So evidently, I wasn't in on it, but Vince catches wind of it. Okay? And he wants to see the tape. So through his connections, he goes to Channel 5 in Memphis, or has the tape, boom, or maybe Jimmy Hart helped, I think. Anyway, Vince got the tape, and he saw the tag match that Randy and Dr. D. David Schultz were in against two enhancement jobbers. But in that match, he saw the Macho Man take the guy and throw him out of the ring, get on the top rope, and jump off, which in those days was quite a feat. Now they're doing it, you know, every 10 seconds.
Right.
Okay. But also the look of Randy in the interview and his work and his quickness and his desire and his, when he did that, you know, you know, the scariness of him. Vince McMahon says, this guy's great. So he put his feelers out, Jimmy Hart, Howard Finkel, Jimmy Hart, and finally to Mr. Coffee in the Midsouth Coliseum. You know who that is?
Guy Coffee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says it, Jimmy Hart, boom, 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 boom. Next thing you know, he's talking to Howard Finkel on the phone.
Huh.
Now, I was supposed to go wrestle for Vern Gagne. And George Scott was the booker of New York at the time. So, and he liked Randy and he liked me. I had worked for him a year and a half. And I love George Scott. I mean, what a phenomenal guy. And he's not feeling too well right now. And I hope he has a speedy recovery. So anyway, I digress again. The transcripts of this is going to be murder. Okay. So what happens is, several phone calls later, he's on the phone with George Scott. And I'm right next to him because we're at a payphone. This is before they had cellular phones. Okay, this is 1985. And, he's got a shot at the top as a heel, blah, blah, blah. He says, but, what about my brother? Because he's going for Vernon. They'll just eat him alive if I go to New York. And they would have, too. Plus, I would have frozen my ass again. So he says, George Scott says, and I'm standing right next to my brother. He said, well, we don't have any room on top. Well, how about in the middle? Well, in the middle is fine. Is he a heel or a baby face? And he goes, are you a heel or a baby face? All right, I just forgot to do his act. Are you a heel or a baby face? Sorry, if you do that too much, your larynx gets sore. And I said, eeny, meeny, miny, moe, okay, I'm a baby face, because I didn't want to do my gimmick and have everybody, up in arms again.
Right.
So I go into, I right there, I became a baby face in the middle. And then while George Scott was the booker, I was very well handled. He had me doing really well. No jobs except for Terry Funk and people like that. And then, which I loved doing because I love Terry Funk. And he had me, winning matches and this and that. I was on a roll. Then something happened. George Scott lost his job after about 6 months or stepped down or whatever happened. I never got the answer. And then, of course, I was the doormat for the WWF. I was getting beaten by everybody, and I stuck it out, toughed it out, and then until I became the genius. So, and I kept my eye on the prize. I was there for the money. I concentrated on the money.
Right. Was Vince good to you in the beginning, or were your initial impression?
Vince was good to me in the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Okay.
And even after the end.
Now, you were one of the first guys ever doing a moonsault, I believe, in the U.S. And
I have credit for that.
Yeah.
I actually was not the first person. I was the first guy to steal the moonsault from Tiger Mask.
Okay.
I saw a match that was done in Madison Square Garden, so that eliminates the theory that I was the first guy to do it in the U.S.
Right.
I saw a match, Tiger Mask against the Dynamite Kid. And I must say that Dynamite Kid, let me just say about him, that Chris Benoit stole a lot of his stuff, and he said that was his hero, that was his god, and this and that. Well, by the time, the match that I saw with Tiger Mask, then when I got to New York in '85, Dynamite Kid had already digressed from that point, because he was a physical cripple.
Right.
Okay? And I might say that Chris Benoit, he may have tried to copy Dynamite Kid, but I am sure that he has surpassed him, even in the early days. Because, that's quite a physical style he's working. And I can't prove this because there's two words, objective and subjective. Okay, diving is objective. Diving is subjective. The judge doesn't like you, you lose. Okay? But swimming is objective. The best man always wins, or the best woman. Whoever touches the thing first, and they can take it by a millionth of a second. So in other words, wrestling is all a matter of opinion. And Ole Anderson has his, I have mine. It is my opinion that Dynamite Kid was one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. And it's also my opinion that Benoit is even better. That he's taken his hero and surpassed his hero. Now, maybe somebody doesn't agree with that. That's the way I see it. Anyway, I saw that Tiger Mask get on the top rope, and immediately I knew I could do it. It's just a matter of getting on the top rope and trying it. And a couple thousand moonsaults later, I think I had it perfected. Now I see that there are fat people doing it better than I ever did.
Huh.
And I still do it in the same way. Of course, I don't wrestle anymore because I am a certified credit counselor, and I no longer need to wrestle.
At any point, were there any suggestions to actually acknowledge that you and Randy were brothers?
What, in New York?
Yeah, in New York.
No.
Was it something that you guys ever wanted to do or not?
Well, I didn't think it would help him. It would probably hurt him. It wouldn't help me that much.
Right.
I didn't want to take away from his push. I was lucky to be there. I would have gone to New York just to take the jackets back because I could see that they were the future of wrestling. I could see that Vince had the pulse on the people, that he understood that it's not wrestling on the marquee, it's entertainment. And he was the first person to say sports entertainment. Now he says world wrestling entertainment. And the proof's in the pudding. He's right. And what was my first impression? He's a meticulous man. If you go to a WWE event, there's no lint on the ring. The poles are painted. If you meet Vince McMahon, he doesn't need to floss. He's flossed. His shoe shines. He's impeccable. the whole, like, for example, the whole family is impeccable. Ricky Steamboat had the greatest arm drag I'd ever seen. He said he got it from Jack Briscoe. I think he took it and improved it. And then I asked Ricky Steamboat, how do you do that? I'm having trouble. And he actually tried to teach me his arm drag. Well, what he succeeded in doing is bringing me from a 4 to a 7 in my arm drag, while he remained a 10. And then nobody surpassed Ricky Steamboat until Shane McMahon came along. Now, who's got the better arm drag? I'd have to see them both. But I'd have to give Steamboat the edge because he did it with his shirt off. And I have to assume that because Shane McMahon wears a shirt, that he must not be Mr. Universe. So, by the same token, because Steamboat wears long tights, I imagine his legs aren't as good as his upper body. In other words, these are smart people, and they're going to accentuate their positives and eliminate the negatives. Mr. Wrestling number 2, if he had ever lost his match in the ring, it would have killed his career because he looked horrible. I mean, he looked like he was 100 years old. And, I mean, I don't mean to be mean.
Right.
But there was a reason he was wearing that mask. Now, an exception to what I've been saying, I just thought of, and made the genius look like an idiot, is Bill Eadie made a fortune with a mask, and then he took it off and became the Demolition and made another fortune. And like I said, there's not a homosexual bone in my body. However, Bill Eadie is the handsomest man you've ever seen in your life. And I can't imagine a guy that looks that good would try to make money with a mask. You know, so that negates what I've just tried to tell you. But Shane McMahon's arm drag, have you ever seen it? Do you agree with me?
Yeah, he does a good
job. Do you understand that you arch your back, you do 5 things at once. You take a picture of it and everybody's in the air. And there's a whipping thing instead of a dragging thing. It should be an arm whip. And it's a beautiful thing when it's right and you know it's right and you know that you know that you know and you carry yourself with that kind of bravado. So my moonsault is like second rate compared to the other people that have improved it. And even fat people can do it. And then they're doing 1.5 twister gainer, boom, 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 you know.
That's crazy now.
It's crazy now. I mean, when I did it, everybody said I was crazy. But it was nothing for me because I knew I could do it.
Now, we talked about Elizabeth, and she came in with Randy into the WWF at the time. Was that something that she wanted to do, or is it something that Randy wanted her to be with him while he was on the road?
Yes and yes and yes.
Okay.
She wanted to do it. Randy wanted her to do it. It was a great thing and a great time.
No, we've done interviews with so many people in the business, and I'd say 90% have talked about Randy being overprotective towards Elizabeth. I mean, we've heard stories about, I guess when they were in Poughkeepsie and other places, that he would be really overprotective of her and like put her in closets and stuff like that, and like, you know, lock the door and, you know, make sure none of the boys, you know, got near her and stuff like that. I mean, what are your thoughts on all that?
My thoughts on that.
And did you see it?
Overprotective as opposed to underprotective. I'd say the greater sin is underprotective. Okay, was she locked into a closet? Absolutely not. She was in her own dressing room.
Right.
So she didn't have to walk around with her bra and panties. I don't see what's the big deal.
Right.
You see, you know, the wrestlers are a bunch of baboons anyway. I mean, what are they, Boy Scouts that grew up and say, we're going to be wrestlers? No. Okay, look, she was not locked in the closet. Randy was very protective of her. She might be, if she were still with Randy, she might be alive today because evidently other people were not as protective of her. So when she got her freedom, which she earned through divorce, she became underprotected and fell by the waysides. So no, she was not locked in a closet. She was in her own dressing room.
Right.
How is being in your own dressing room locked in a closet? You know, all the wrestlers that have testified that, name names, I bet you, I'll just take a guess that the sum total of their net worth is negative millions. And they're motivated by talking about Randy as a jealous person. Randy is healthy, wealthy, and wise, and like dandruff on his shoulders, so just flick it off.
Right.
It's ridiculous. I mean, you get the point?
Yeah.
Okay. Elizabeth was handled very well by Randy. I'm a divorced man. Divorce is an epidemic because more than 50% of all people that get married wind up in divorce. And I have a hunch to thinking that the other 50% would like to get divorced. But, you know, because I'm a Catholic, and the three things a Catholic doesn't do is divorce, suicide, and abortion. Well, that's why I hung in there for 12 years. And thank God my wife dumped me, you know, because it was like having a cancer removed. But they walk around, strut around, and think that their life story is the New Testament. Like they're going to talk about my brother, who's never been arrested or kept after school. Please. You know, they're just jealous. Macho Man's a hard guy not to be jealous of. Fortunately, his brother is very well adjusted.
Hulk Hogan, what are your impressions of the Hulkster?
I think he is God's gift to wrestling, and I think I will never... See, I don't bite the hand that feeds me, and I don't bite the hand that fed me. And in Topeka, Kansas, he got in the ring with the genius, Lanny Poffo, and he led me, a la Terry Funk, a la the late Gino Hernandez. He took the limited ability that the genius had to offer. He liked my gimmick. He scratched me down the back and he says, "I'll sell it like Jim Barnett." You know,
I still remember that today. To this day, I remember you selling.
It was a fun match, but some of the boys said, "Well, it's not wrestling." Well, please, it may not be wrestling, but can't I be the only comedian in a very serious business?
Right.
See, I believe in variety. I believe when you go to the circus, you need the fat lady, and you need the flying trapeze, and you need the two-headed geek. You know, let's have it all, and then. Hopefully, as a paying customer, you might like one of them, or both of them, or either of them, or something. But if every wrestler wore the same colored trunks and did the same things, it wouldn't be special, would it? If we all had physiques like Lex Luger, it would no longer be different. Okay? I'm making an excuse for having a poor physique. Yeah. But my point is, how can I ever say anything bad about Hulk Hogan when he actually got in the ring and did a job for somebody that couldn't even beat him to the bathroom if it were a real fight? In other words, Hulk Hogan was the man. And for one brief shining moment, he made the genius the man. And God bless Vince McMahon for allowing it to happen. And for not listening to any of the naysayers that thought that that Hulk was slumming by wrestling the genius. But he proved that even though I went to White Plains, New York about a year before, and Arnold Skolin came up to me and says, "Lanny, can you do me a favor? This is our hometown. Can you put my son over in a match?" And I did a job for George Skolin. And I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And then I wrestled the match. I went to the venues, and 300 Frisbees were there, and 300 Frisbees were sold. And fans came up to me and says, how'd you let that fat piece of crap beat you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a thin piece of crap, I guess."
Did you ever see any professional jealousy between your brother and Hogan?
You know, I like to consider that question like a mud puddle, and I'm on a sidewalk. I like to walk around that. Okay. This is an election year, and I will reply to your question without answering it. Let's just say that it is human nature to have jealousy between great people. Right. Okay, and if there is any jealousy like that, since it's not the Macho Man here, and since evidently it costs more money to have the Macho Man here, why don't we wait until you can raise the money to put the Macho Man here?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
All right.
Rather than lie to you, I'd rather say I'm not qualified to answer.
Okay, not a problem. How hot was the Paul Orndorff Hogan feud for the company at the time?
Well, Hulk Hogan was just like Ric Flair. He drew money no matter who he wrestled. No matter who he wrestled. In other words, Ric Flair against a player to be named later in Charlotte would draw capacity houses. Well, that was the same type of drawing power that Hulk Hogan enjoyed. It didn't matter. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say one more thing about Ole. Then, finally, I take you back now to I take you back now to 1977.
It's safe to say you and Ole won't be doing dinner anytime soon, right?
Oh, we'll be doing dinner. Yeah. Well, shoot for who gets the bill, okay? They finally put Ric Flair and Greg the Hammer Valentine against Gene and Ole Anderson. And they drew big time. And what do you think happens? Who do you think the fans made the babyface? The Andersons. I didn't give you a chance to answer. Okay. Anything other than the Andersons is not the correct answer. The Andersons were 100% babyface. And then the Andersons said, that means that the people believe in us more because they're cheering us. Well, wait a minute now. We have you saying that Ric Flair's not good because he may draw a sellout crowd, but because 30% of the crowd is cheering him, that he's not a proper heel. Now all of a sudden, he's completely being out-heeled. And not only that, he's claiming the house. Look at the house I drew, that we drew, that this is the Andersons' house. And, you know, he's enjoying. So in other words, a bad house is an orphan, where a good house or a sellout house has many fathers. Everybody's taking the credit. Nobody's taking the blame. And Ole Anderson, there should be a picture of him when it comes to that syllogism. Okay? So Orndorff, how did the feud between Orndorff and Hogan get over was your question. And my answer was Hulk Hogan and anybody got over. And anybody that disagrees is either stupid, lying, or jealous. And that's just the way it is. And Macho Man had that same drawing appeal also.
Oh, yeah, definitely. What are some of your memories of Piper at this time?
Roddy Piper is the greatest, one of the greatest unique pieces of high energy that ever walked into a ring. When he got to New York, he had stopped doing the pipes. And I thought that was something missing. I didn't ever ask him why not, because I had too much respect for him.
Right.
Because as a worker or as a talent in this business, I didn't feel, even though I consider him my friend, I really like him. I still do. I thought that would be a disrespectful question to ask such a great talent who never did anything to me except try to help me. And whenever he wrestled me, he elevated me up to his level. And if I had, what I really appreciate about him, the reason I love Roddy Piper is because he went out of his way to call up the Garibaldis in Los Angeles. I forgot the promoter's name of who ran wrestling in Los Angeles. Who was the promoter? Anyway,
Shires?
No, that was San
San
Francisco.
Francisco.
I can't remember, but it was
LaBelle?
maybe Mike LaBelle.
Yeah.
He said he actually dialed the number and says, "Here's Lanny," and put me on the phone with him. And he had told Mike LaBelle that I could be their top heel, and he had it all straightened out for me to go in there, and they made me an offer, and it was absolutely nothing that I had done. It was Piper doing it for me because he could, because he had broken all the records there. That's where he cut his teeth. That's where he became known as a box office attraction. That's where he perfected his Roddy Piper gimmick before he went to Portland. And then I had the very sad news to tell him that I had decided to go to Kentucky with my parents and with my brother to start a territory. And I decided to handle it as a non-Richard Nixon person. I just went up to him, told him that, say, thank you, but, and I said, please let me, and I called Mike LaBelle, and I said, thank you for the opportunity. However, I've decided we're going into business for ourselves, and I appreciate, and he said, absolutely no problem. Thank you for calling me. That's very non-wrestler-like of you to address me and tell me you're not coming in. Usually, people just don't show up. You see what I mean? In other words, so I felt good about that I handled it like a man. It's just look a person in the eye, tell them the truth. I said, look a person in the eye, tell them the truth.
Did anybody ever try to play you and your brother against each other at all?
In a shoot or work?
In a shoot.
No.
No. Okay.
They couldn't anyway, because I'm like Teflon Man, water off a duck's back. You can't get to me. In our family, there was nothing but ribs. If you couldn't take a joke, you don't belong in our family.
Right.
I learned to take a joke. I've always been able to take a joke, even at my expense. And even if you hurt my feelings, I'll never let you see it. My pillow knows the truth. I'll cry myself to sleep.
Huh.
But I can take it. Nothing bothers me. I already know my shortcomings. I'm working with what I have. I believe in, like Tigger. It's what you do with what you got, and are you really nice or not? If you're thoughtful and you're true, no one can compare to you. That's too good for just children. Everybody should learn that song.
Let's see. How crazy was the WWF drug scene at this time?
Well, I don't want to be a narc, okay? But may I say that I, personally, don't even take aspirin, and I saw some things, okay? And may I also say that, I don't know, 1992, when it all came to a head and things were said and federal got involved and all this stuff, I was glad to see Vince get out of it because he was 100% not guilty, in my opinion. Okay, like, for example, I love superstar Billy Graham. He's always been nice to me. However, if a man takes steroids, and by the way, he took them before he ever met Vern Gagne, and then he rose to the top in Vern's territory, and then he made money everywhere he ever went because he was ahead of his time, and he's totally authentic in a world where all that glitters is not gold. Okay, and in his day, he was the man. But don't blame Vince McMahon because you take steroids. And don't blame Vince McMahon because you act like Judy Garland when you're on the road. You know, with the pills and the liquor and the uppers and the downers. And well, I can't sleep. Well, just watch TV and rest. You know, there's a little bit of conformity that's going on that, I want to get into wrestling so I can party. Well, can you at least party responsibly? Because you know that if you drink too much, you're going to have a little headache in the morning. So that should be your body telling you that you've been abusing yourself. Now, you can abuse yourself a little or you can abuse yourself a lot. I like to abuse myself not at all.
Right. As far as the Honky Tonk Man, we talked about him a little bit earlier on. As far as him, what are your memories of some of your matches with him?
Well, let me see. They brought him in as a babyface, didn't they? And he didn't get over.
Right.
Okay? And then they made him a heel, and he got over. In other words, they were going to make him get over no matter what. And I thought he was an average worker with an excellent gimmick. And he had, however, he claims he is the greatest intercontinental champion of all time. And he says that in the dressing room, too.
Huh.
Now, when he says he's the greatest intercontinental champion of all time, may I just say, Honky Tonk Man, you are putting down some excellent talent. Okay.
Memories of the Bulldogs, and maybe some of the ribs that you witnessed them pull.
Well, I love the Bulldogs. I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, you must have no humanity at all. They were fun-loving, excellent people. However, they got carried away. Now, let me give you an example of why I love the Bulldogs, okay? And then I want to tell you about why I don't love them. Because there is good and bad in the Bulldogs. Mostly good. Davey Boy Smith came up to me and he says, have you seen the new picture of Bret Hart? He had cut out with his scissors a hole where Bret Hart's face was. And then he pressed it against his open fly and he put his genitalia out of the... So in other words, Bret Hart's face was now...
His dick.
Yeah. So how could you not like a guy like that, right? Yeah, okay. I was trying to be nice, but Mom, if you're watching, it was this package that came out of the whatever. Okay, go on.
No, we were just talking about them. You also said you had...
Oh, the bad stuff?
Yeah, the bad stuff.
Okay. In Toronto, Dynamite Kid came up to me and says, Lanny, we're going to have a program with the Rougeaus. I promise you that we're going to get those guys. And I thought, whoa, what do you mean get those guys? Folk them. We're going to get them. You watch. And I said, why? I like the Rougeaus. And I like them both.
Right.
They're going to get those guys. And I'll tell you something about the Rougeaus. They're not easily gotten. I saw an interview that was so great. It was Bruce Lee. I love Bruce Lee. He had his heyday before, I was young. Fortunately, through the magic of television, there's such a thing as reruns. He gave a 1-hour interview, and I thought, this is the greatest man I've ever met.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. We can edit, right?
Yep.
Okay. And Bruce Lee says, the secret to self-defense, there are 2 things. Number 1, respect for everybody. Number 2, underestimate nobody. So I must say that the Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith were guilty of A, not respecting everybody, the Rougeaus, and B, underestimating people, because those Rougeaus are not easy pickings. As a matter of fact, it was Dino Bravo, one of the toughest men in the world, and Rick Martel, and they're all French Canadians. One's from Quebec City, one's from Montreal, but they're all in the clique together. They're in that clique. And they explained to me that the Rougeaus were no one to mess with. And their father, Jacques, he was famous for the one-punch knockout. And as you can see, that they both were heavily bone-structured people and very coordinated. So that's what the ability to defend yourself is. Size, strength, quickness, ability, guts, and kinesthetic sense. In other words, they were athletes. Don't be so sure. So what happened is, they were abusing the Rougeaus every night. And the Rougeaus, being gentlemen, put up with it every night. Finally, as in Popeye, that's all I can stand. I can't stand no more. Bum, 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 bum. They make their comeback. In the form of, I wasn't there, but Jacques Rougeau sucker punched the Dynamite Kid. Boom. Knocked out teeth and everything, and boom, boom, boom. Well, I had heard about it, but then the very next day, we went to France and Italy together. And then I saw the Bulldogs acting like maniacs at the airport, which they did a little bit more this time than usual. And Dynamite says, look at my teeth. And they were all missing and swollen and gums bleeding. It was disgusting. I hope I didn't disgust you when I showed you my teeth. Anyway, in case you're out there. Okay, anyway. So then I heard their side of the story. Well, I happen to know that they had foreshadowed this weeks before. And I knew that the Rougeaus were not easy pickings. And then they got in the habit of defecating in the suitcases of people they didn't like. Now, I was so cautious of that the genius full of glory and renown would hide his suitcase from those people, because then they started playing a game of can you top this? And it was Mr. Perfect, and it was this guy, and that guy, and Shawn Michaels, and this and that. I don't mean to name names,
right?
But it was like they were in competition to see who could do it more. So I would hide my suitcase, and about 2 times, the genius hid his suitcase so well that I couldn't find it either. But I never had the evidence of their disdain in my suitcase. So, it was worth it.
Memories of Jake the Snake.
Jake the Snake was the greatest waste of talent in the history of the business. He had it all. He had looks, personality. His work was excellent. He had the greatest gimmick. People loved that snake. I remember when they were going to work a deal with him and Hulk Hogan, Hulk negated the deal because the people were shouting DDT, DDT, and Hulk didn't like it, so they cut it. I'm not talking out of school. This happened.
All right.
Okay. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to attest to it. He was so over. He was cool. He was a heel, but he was cool. They liked him as a babyface. They liked him as a heel. I was the babyface that they chose to work with the heels as they came in to do the job for them when I was leaving Lanny. And the greatest, I loved doing it for Terry Funk. I also loved doing it for the great Kamala, the Ugandan warrior, because I loved Kamala and I loved King Curtis. I mean, he's the greatest. I have a story about him. Please, when I get, we're talking about Jake now, but let me tell you about King Curtis later.
Okay.
Please remind me, because it's an important story. I wasn't there, but I felt like I was in the room. Okay. Anyway, about Jake the Snake. Did you see the movie Beyond the Mat?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It breaks my heart to think that Jake the Snake Robert, who was God's gift to wrestling as much as he was, sunk so low as an individual. And this is what happens when your demons catch up with you. And I happen to really love Grizzly Smith. And he was portrayed in a very bad way. Like he was some type of a pedophile doing things to his own children, whatever. And I don't know if all that's true. All I know is when I worked for Bill Watts, Grizzly Smith was the nicest person. And I did 500 miles in one day with him. And then the next day we did 400. And the next day we were together a lot. And I can fool you for about 10 miles. And then after a while, the real me is going to come out and you're going to see that I'm full of it. You see what I mean?
Right.
Eventually, if you hang around a person long enough, it's a little like being married. And then, you know, in marriages, the definition of marriage for me is the courtship is what can I do for you, honey? And then it turns into what can I take from you, stupid? Okay, well, when people, sometimes you're with people and they get away with it for a while. And the next thing you know, you're at each other's throats because it's a captive audience. In real life, if you meet a person, you don't like them, you leave the room. But when you're going 75 miles an hour, how can you leave that room? What are you going to do, leap to your death? You know, you have to stay with that person because you have to make the town. So that's a captive audience. And some of the wrestlers are not pleasant to be with. Grizzly Smith was the most fun I've ever had, except for two things about him I couldn't stand. Secondhand smoke, and he kept his Chevrolet Caprice below Arctic levels. You know what I mean? I would dress in looking like Kenny on South Park. Because I knew I was traveling with the Grizzly.
Were you ever frustrated that you were doing prelims for the first 2 or 3 years there? Or actually, you stated before that you didn't really care. You just happened to be at the show.
Yes, let me go back to Grizzly Smith, then I'll answer that.
Okay.
When I saw Beyond the Mat, I saw the daughter who had the tongue thing.
Right.
You know, I mean, when I see that, I just say, oh, man, you know, in the absence of leadership, they'll follow anybody. Oh, I want something that's going to, I mean, it'd be a good salesman to convince the first person to do that, right? So anyway, she's complaining about her father. Then Jake is complaining about his father. And then Grizzly says, well, Jake Roberts was born in love and I still love him. And I thought to myself, let's say you didn't know anybody. Let's say it was ready, set, go. Everybody make their own first impression. The winner, Grizzly Smith. He doesn't hate anybody. I heard bad things said about him. I don't believe a word of it. And even if it was a little bit true, that means it's a little false too. Okay? So Grizzly Smith is one of the greatest people I've ever met in the business. Except he gave me secondhand smoke and he kept the freezing cold. Okay?
Right.
Okay, what was the next? I'm sorry, the next one that I interrupted?
Oh, I asked you if you were frustrated during your first 2 or 3 years working there, doing prelims.
I was, you're not going to believe this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I was so happy to be a part of it that, no, I wasn't frustrated. I was excited to get up in the morning and be in the World Wrestling Federation, even if it meant doing jobs on worldwide TV. Because let's look at all I gained. I'm a very thrifty person. I don't waste my money flying different places, throwing it around flagrantly. That's why I'm financially stable today. But Vince McMahon bought my plane ticket to go to every state in the United States, all over Canada. I'm a Canadian-born American citizen. I love going places. I love looking out the window. I love learning about places. I love the fact that I know that there are 4 commonwealths and all the rest are called states, and I know which ones they are and I know why. I'm not going to bore you with that,
Right.
but I love knowing that stuff. And then I get to go all throughout Europe. I get to go to Australia, New Zealand. I've been everywhere. And why? Because of the World Wrestling Federation. And I did my jobs. I put people over. I did what people didn't want to do. I did what people wouldn't have done. And then when I turned heel, I made myself an ass on TV like I'm some effeminate person. But I sincerely believed that that's the only way I could have gotten over to the best of my ability. And I actually got to work with the great Hulk Hogan for 4 months out of my life. And I got to team up with one of the greatest workers that ever lived, Curt Hennig.
I'm going to ask you about Curt in a little bit. Were you ever disappointed that you weren't on WrestleMania 3?
Of course I was. But what I got to do instead was be on NBC and have Andre the Giant headbutt me and throw me over the top rope. Now, even though I wasn't on WrestleMania 3, I felt that without the jabronis, you can't have any stars. And what a great opportunity to be a jabroni for the great Andre the Giant and to be the first person to bleed on NBC. I mean, I did the best I could. And I love Andre, and I did the best I could for Andre. And if that made him mean, maybe if my parents had never had sex and had me, they would have probably still drawn over 93,000 people that night. But at least I did my part to make Andre important, to make him more vicious, that he took a sad, pathetic Caucasian young man named Leaping Lanny, bloody him up and throw him over the top rope. So I can feel up. See, the thing is, I don't want to be a guy. Let me be the only old timer that's not angry. Let me be the opposite of Ole Anderson. Let Ole Anderson be on the opposite end of the continuum, a bitter old man. Let me be a cheerful young man for all the days of my life, because old is a choice. Look at Jack LaLanne. He's one of my heroes. He just turned 90. And he's the most optimistic, effervescent person in the world, still in shape. Can't I be like him? Can't that be my role model? I would like to be 90 years old and look like that.
All right.
So I didn't get to be in WrestleMania 3. I was in WrestleMania 7. I was in the Survivor Series. I was a part of the World Wrestling Federation. I love those people. Even the people that don't love me back, I love them. That's the message I'm sending out. Every wrestler that will be in this chair, if they were the booker, they put themselves on top. But I got my chance on top. And may I say that I'm not going to be like the Andersons claiming the house, but I'm saying while I was co-starring in the main event with the great Hulk Hogan and the great Mr. Perfect, and 2 box office records fell. The Los Angeles Coliseum and the Myriad in Oklahoma City. Okay, and I'm not saying I claim in the house,
Right.
but I did not repel when I got my chance. It's a team sport, you know. And besides, Hulk Hogan's the man. He was the nucleus. I was just the electron for 4 months. And the 21 years I spent, if you want to call it big fish, little pond, little fish, big pond, jabroni hood, whatever you call it, was it all worth it to be 4 months with Hulk Hogan? Yes.
Talk a little bit about Andre. What was he like to work with, and was he miserable at the end of his run?
Andre was very miserable most of the time in the 80s, since 1985. When I met him, it was working for the Sheik and then on for Amarillo, Texas for the Funks.
Right.
Andre was actually one of the great workers, so great that he'd have been wrestling on top if he were 5 foot 10 inches tall. That's how great he was. But in 1985, I was almost taller than him. I mean, he has a 500-pound skeleton, but he was bubble butt sway back, and he was all
Right.
hunched over like that. And it was sad to see. So I'm in the dressing room in Buffalo, New York. There's a snowstorm. I hadn't said hello to Andre because he hadn't said hello to me yet. He was so miserable and he was in horrible pain. And I can imagine that the pain that a giant has is indescribable. I would just think that they have bigger pain than small people.
Right.
I don't know. I guess everybody's pain, the difference between a major heart attack and a minor heart attack is a major heart attack is if it happens to me, a minor heart attack is what you get. You know. So in other words, whose pain are we measuring? I'm in the dressing room in Buffalo, New York, and Andre is sadder than usual. There's a snowstorm outside. We're very early because if we didn't get in there early, we wouldn't have got in there at all. And he has no playing cards. And that's all Andre wanted to do in the dressing room was play cards. So I decided, like underdog, when Andre's in trouble, I am not slow. It's hip, 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 and away I go. I went up the stairs and I saw approximately 10 female groupies. And I could range them in looks from a couple of 10s, jacks are better, 9, 9, 8, 8s, blah, 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 blah. I took the ugliest one. And I went up to her because of supply and demand. And I don't mean to be cruel. And I said, "Hi, I'm Lanny Poffo, and I have a problem." She says, "What can I help you with? What can I do?" If I had gone to the pretty girl, she would have told me to go have sex with myself or something because of supply and demand. I just know human nature. If you want something done, go to the road less traveled. Go to the one that least likely to, be involved in something like that. I said, "Here's $10. I don't know Buffalo. Please, Andre is downstairs and he needs a deck of cards. And step lively because time's wasting and he's miserable." I give her the $10. She comes back about 2 minutes before she left. That's what attitude is. And she says, "Here." And she was so happy. And it wasn't an ordinary deck of playing cards, my friend. It was Bicycle, the finest brand in the world. Okay? Not some off-brand.
Right.
Bicycle playing cards, the trademark. So then we had an argument. I tried to let her keep the change. She tried to give me back the change. I said, "Please, you've just gone in the snowstorm, risking your life. The change is yours. As a matter of fact, I should pay you more money." She says, "Okay, no time to waste." I gave her the money. And I said, "Andre, voila." He looks at me and he teared up and he goes, "Merci beaucoup, monsieur." And he grabbed me. And when he put his bananas around my head, he had me. There was no getting away. This wasn't Gene Anderson. This was Andre. Whoa. It looked like, wow, that was just one hand. So from then on, my name was Boss Man to him. Now, yes, he was in horrible pain. It was brutal to watch him. But you have to understand about Andre. He loved wrestling. And you know what else he loved? He always kept a videotape of The Princess Bride in his bag. And whenever he'd go to any hotel, he'd insist that there was VCR. And he'd always play that. He loved that movie. And he should be proud of it because he did a fantastic job. And that's what made him happy, the fact that he did The Princess Bride. And when people came to his room, he'd play that for them. Even if you see it 100 times.
He'd still show you.
Yes.
Did you see him drink a lot all the time?
Yes.
Yeah, he was notorious for that.
But don't forget, the same thing that would give me a buzz wouldn't give him a buzz.
Right, he'd have to drink
So he'd have to drink copious amounts and mass quantities in order to get in other words, whatever killed Elizabeth wouldn't give him a buzz.
Right.
Elizabeth weighed 85 pounds.
Going back to King Curtis, you had some stories about
Yes,
King Curtis.
I do. But may I say that it was Rick Martel that told me the story about King Curtis, okay? So this is once removed. I've been to New Zealand, but I wasn't there in the room at this time. If you're familiar with the career of Ricky Martel, he was one of the biggest stars that ever hit Hawaii, New Zealand. Actually, every place he's ever been, he's been a great star. And he's a phenomenal person, too. And he and his wife, Joanna, have recently adopted a beautiful Chinese daughter from the People's Republic of China. Are you aware of what happens to an orphan in that country?
I don't. If it's a girl,
It's a girl.
yeah, I think they don't want girls. Basically, I've heard horror
Basically,
stories.
basically, they're slaves for snacks for the rest of their lives.
Huh.
Okay, and instead of that, she's going to have the best that life has to offer because someone loved her enough to rescue. I mean, you can't change the whole world, but you can take one little girl and be that miracle.
What did you say? They're slave for sex? Is that what you said?
Not slave for sex, slave for snacks.
Okay.
In other words, they get, well, no, there is such a thing as slave. As a matter of fact, the Filipinos were
I just read that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I read it too.
Yeah.
No, there is such a. That's why you.
That's why I was asking.
That's why you're asking, and that's true. But no, what they do is they just put them to work and they just feed them anything,
Ugh.
and it's not. They're not really interested in their fulfillment.
Right.
Where Rick and Joanna are going to make sure that she has all the best, and I think it's a beautiful story. In other words, everybody says, "God, give me a miracle." Well, that's not it. It's God, make me the miracle, make me the gift. That's the secret to life. I read Og Mandino, I read Dr. Wayne Dyer, I read Deepak Chopra. I'm trying to become a better person. Anyway, okay, let's get back to King Curtis. Curtis was like a fantastic star in Hawaii. Every place he had the gift. You know that. He had the interview, he had the work, he had the look. But he had already burned his bridge with Steve Rickard, the promoter from New Zealand, many times. He had double-crossed him with Mark Lewin and this and that. I mean, I don't want to go on, but you know how it is. He had already... Now he found himself in a situation where he had burned his bridges in so many places. He needed a job. And Rickard was angry with him. And even though he knew that Curtis was phenomenal talent and drew nothing but money wherever he went because he had the gift. And of course, Ricky Martel was the greatest babyface and beloved. So they put him on some insulting salary of $500 a week, which was ridiculous, yet sometimes one eye is king in the valley of the blind, and when supply and demand goes against you, you take what you can get. So Martel and Iake, you can imagine how great it was. They tore the house down. They just boom, ba boom, ba boom, juice too, and this and that. Outside of the ring, chairs,
right.
Everything. And they come back to the dressing room, and Curtis was a little older by then, and Martel was in his prime. And Rickard comes into the dressing room and he says, he criticized the match. And there was no criticizing a match like that. It was two of the greatest workers in the country. I mean, and let me go back. When Rick Martel told me the story, he didn't put himself over. I am putting him over. I am taking the liberty to embellish. Rick Martel does not talk like that, like I'm the greatest. I'm telling you, I know Rick Martel. I know what a great heel and babyface he is. What a great champion he was. What a great individual he is. So I don't want to make you understand that just because the story's twice removed, I didn't want you to think that Rick says that, he's the most, he's humble, he's got humility, and he doesn't talk like that. He's got genuine confidence. He doesn't have to brag.
Right.
Okay? So they raise the roof. They get back to the dressing room. The boys say, hey, that was great. But Rickard comes in and starts criticizing unmercifully King Curtis. And Curtis is out of breath, and he's bleeding, and he's sweating, and he's listening to it. And he just takes it. And after Rickard leaves the room, he says in that Curtis voice, "What does he want for $500 a week? Harley race?" And of course, Rickard could hear him because that's how loud he is.
Right.
But what a great story, huh? Yeah.
Was there any jealousy between Beefcake and Hogan's relationship
With the rest of the boys?
Yeah.
Yeah. People thought, well, Beefcake's only getting his break because of Hulk Hogan.
Right.
Well, when I wrestled Hulk Hogan myself, several people thought that was the same thing. Only because I was the Macho Man's brother did I get the break. So may I not say who said it, came up to me in the dressing room in front of all the boys, say, "Isn't it true that you're only getting a break because the Macho Man's your brother?" And I said, "Yes." It just takes the bullets right out of their gun.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Huh.
Do I have to mention whose name it was if he's deceased?
If you don't want to, you don't have to.
I'd rather not because it's true. I got the break because I'm the Macho Man's brother, okay? In other words, but then again, I did carry the mail for quite a few years in anonymity,
Right.
you know, and I did the blade job so Andre could get the main event, so it was my turn. So if you want to say that the Macho Man, okay, guilty as charged. I mean, that takes the bullets out of your gun. If it makes you feel better, I can handle it.
How did the whole idea for the Genius gimmick come about? And also, what were the long range plans for the gimmick?
Well, nobody told me any long range plans for the gimmick, but it was Vince McMahon's idea, and I was excited because it seemed like a big break and a new thing, and it seemed like something that I could take my Ricky Starr gimmick that nobody liked and use that, because there were people that thought I couldn't get the heat after being so well liked as a babyface. Well, I knew if I made a complete metamorphosis, and I knew that Ricky Starr gimmick in the back of my head that I was forced to shut down in Charlotte could be utilized many years later in the Big Apple. So I used it, and Hogan loved it. Vince loved it for a while. I imagine it got old for them, but it sure worked for a while, and I'm glad that I learned it, hit it, and then exploited it at the right moment. And it was all worth it, and I have absolutely no bitterness. You change one word and bitter becomes better. B-I-T-T-R becomes B-E-T-T-E-R.
Speaking of gimmicks, we never really talked about it. How did you come about doing the poetry like before the match? I know you said you're a fan of it, but whose idea was it to do that?
Vince McMahon. Mm-hmm. First, it started with me being proactive because I was on a TV show called TNT, Tuesday Night Titans. Do you remember it?
Yep. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. I knew that as a jabroni, without a push, that I knew that I had 6 minutes to get over or don't get over either way. And I felt I had the capabilities to get over because I've always felt more confident in front of the microphone than in the ring. Okay, and this is my chance to show the powers that be that I was capable. So I didn't want to give the babyface interview, "Well, I'm just glad to be here. I hope I'm going to do my best," and that's all I can say. Okay, so I put on my suit of armor that I got as a brainchild of some bad dream that I had, that I thought, is there some way I can get over without any ability whatsoever? Okay, so I got my suit of armor, $1,100, which was theatrical armor that probably in the Broadway musical Camelot, King Arthur, Sir Lancelot would wear. Okay, it wasn't real armor, it was theatrical armor. I put it on, and I walked out there, and I gave this poem. Look back through the annals of history and the Wrestling Hall of Fame, men from all nations with courage to spare, who struggled to carve out a name. Now compare these high standards of valor to those chivalrous knights of yore, with bravery staunch as their armor, their glory both legend and lore. My medieval connection with wrestling relives that magnificent past, although mindless skeptics may snicker and scoff, the winner is he who laughs last. Alive with the love of wrestling, I appear on TNT, between Vince and Awful Alfred, the hottest show on TV. I'm not your average wrestler, but I wouldn't want to be. I never scream or kiss my arms. I'm happy just being me. I call myself Leaping Lanny. I validate what I say to every single wrestling fan who's watching USA. Yes, I believe in miracles as God has blessed this great land. I believe the referee will soon be raising my hand. And what happened was, Bobby Heenan was with me, and that's perfect because he could play just throw a little vinegar in the greens. Right. And we had some banter back and forth, and And then we went to black, and the segment changed, and Vince McMahon says, Lanny, that was great. From now on, when you get in the ring, you do a poem before every match.
That's awesome.
And I said, thank you. I'll do my best. But then at the same time, when I went to bed that night, I didn't say wet the bed, did I? I said went to
Right.
bed. Okay. Folks, this is a shoot interview, and I wear adult diapers. Okay. When I went to bed, W-E-N-T.
Right.
See how one little letter can change the whole message?
It's great.
Okay. So when I went to bed that night, I realized, ruh-roh, I have to do a poem before every match. Be careful what you wish for.
Right.
So I thought to myself, I said, there must be some way that I can tease the audience into liking me even if they don't, not booing me. So I decided to throw scrolls of poetry to the people. But there was a problem with that. It only went to the first row and sometimes not even that far.
Right.
And that's like a social class distinction that I don't like the cheap seats. So I thought to myself, this isn't going to fly. And I thought to myself, Frisbees will. So then I invested a little money and I wrote a poem on Frisbees. I had it embossed. And anybody can do it, but do they? But I'm just thinking also, how can I get over without any ability whatsoever? And I said, the Frisbee says, if I can remember it, it's been a long time. The World Wrestling Federation has caused a culture shock in every phase of our society, from classical to rock. In triumphant jubilation, every social class is won with a single common interest, just to have a little fun. I've seen the rapture in the eyes of fans from every nation. You made us what we are today, World Wrestling Federation. So I would, on the other side, I would write a poem. Now, I have a complaint. Chief J. Strongbow. Yeah, he was the guy that would tell you who you were going to go up against, right? And you know what? He never told me who I was going to do it until they put it on the chalkboard. He wouldn't let me know in advance. So I had to write a poem sometimes with moments to go. Now, what I found out about myself was, fortunately, I am a real genius. I can't come up with it that quickly. I didn't realize how good I was until I was forced into it. With my back to the wall, with the pressure on, that I can actually come up with that type of thing. And maybe it made up for whatever I lacked in the ring. It was good enough to keep me having a job for 7 years.
All right. You actually answered a lot of my questions.
Yeah. Well, did you ever do a poem on some guy or like your opponent, and you ever say something like criticizing and you got heat from them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any names?
Well, I love this guy, like Hercules Hernandez.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the poem. It ended. The punchline was, his male ego is very insecure, and that in itself wouldn't upset anyone. But when I said that line, which was my punchline, I made the little gesture. And that is something that no man wants to hear.
All right.
Okay.
When Dusty Rhodes came into the company and Vince put the polka dots on him, kind of as a punishment for him being in the competition, did everyone laugh behind his back? The boys.
Funny you should mention that. Do you remember the Warlord and the Barbarian?
Yes, Powers of Pain.
Yes. Okay. I am on the road with the Barbarian. Okay? And he says, I'm not going to imitate his accent, but he says he hates Dusty Rhodes. When he sees him, he's going to kill him with his bare hands. And when this guy says that, you better believe it. I was a little bit, I thought to myself, wow, I love my nose. I love breathing through it.
All right.
I think the Barbarian could ruin that for me if he wanted to.
All right.
Again, he'd make me look like some type of Shar-Pei dog or something. I don't know. With one punch. And so I followed him into the dressing room, and there was no Dusty Rhodes, and I was a little nervous. And then when Dusty finally showed up, hey, Barbarian, boom, 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 boom. And you know what happened? I said, oh no, Barbarian's going to hurt him because he said that he would in the car. Barbarian hugged him. Dusty Rhodes is so charming and so much fun
Right.
that he took this angry man and just loved him up or something like that. I don't know how he did it, but he does it very well. And Dusty Rhodes is also in a group of people that were the lip, not the load of the business, that understood that it was important to sell tickets and succeeded. And about the yellow polka dots, I don't believe that Vince McMahon is the type of person that would do anything to shoot himself in the foot intentionally. I think that if I'm wrong, I don't believe that he does anything on his own product that is going to diminish the success of it.
Right.
I believe that if he really didn't like Dusty, he would prove it by never booking him. I think that he utilized Dusty and Sapphire to entertain the people, and they certainly did entertain the people. What's wrong with a few polka dots?
How did you wind up with Curt Hennig?
Just a luckiest break of my life. And he's an excellent worker, fantastic person, and he broke my heart. He died. I had no idea. I promise you, I've never seen him do any of that stuff. He wasn't doing it when he was with me. I saw the toxicology report. I was shocked. It's just that you never know. Maybe because he knew he had to take tests that he was being clean, or maybe his problem came later. Did you know the cause of death? It was an acute cocaine, whatever.
Right.
And I said, well, you got me, because he was always a fantastic gentleman. He was a hilarious person to be with. He was only business in the ring. He had matches with Bret Hart that were so outstanding that I was just proud to be a part of it, even sitting there watching. These people deserve a lot of credit, but I don't know. I can't talk about it anymore. I liked him so much, and I'm so sorry that he's gone.
Were you told that your wrestling role would phase out when you were put with Curt?
No, it just phased out.
Okay.
I mean, but I knew that everything in life is temporary, and I knew that I was going to enjoy it each moment I had it. And even after my push was done, I tried everything I could. Like, for example, Brutus the Barber Beat kept cutting my hair. So I knew that I could get heat if I put on a wig and then something like a wrestling headgear, a shooter's headgear, in order to keep the wig on, and then lose my hair and be humiliated. And then when I would get beat by Hulk Hogan at the end there, he would either have Beefcake cut my hair, and in the times that Beefcake wasn't around, I said, may I make a suggestion? He said, what is it, brother? And I said, take me across your knee, pull my trunks down, and spank my butt rosy red.
Huh.
And that got over. And then, of course, me selling it and keeping my trunks down.
All right.
Let's put it this way. Ole Anderson say, that's not wrestling. It was fun. You got a guy playing an effeminate heel. He needs to get his ass spanked.
Right. Thoughts on Ultimate Warrior and your memories on him?
Well, he got over big time. He ran to the ring, shook the rope, did the thing, and it worked. He had all the visuals. He was a stunning looking man. He looked like a comic strip character. They say that, of course, he was a great Intercontinental champion, but they say when he got the world belt, he didn't draw. I was there. That's true. He didn't. However, he was an asset to the World Wrestling Federation, and perhaps the role of world champion could have been too much for him at the time. But at least it seemed like capable shoulders at the time, because his character was a little bit one-dimensional. And I realize that when I say that, you're listening to a one-dimensional character. So it's pot calling the kettle black. I have a below-average physique in wrestling. He had the ultimate physique in wrestling. But my ability was on the microphone. And, we all play our aces. I'd say the Macho Man has it all. He has the work, the look, the ability in the ring, this and that, and the indefinable je ne sais quoi. Plus, he had another something. He had the lovely Elizabeth, which gave it the love-hate thing. And then, all right, go on. I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
No, it's okay. Was there any bitterness ever between you and your brother since that you were now working with Hogan again with Curt and he was like under working with Duggan?
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, my brother had more matches with Hulk Hogan than any other person in history. And no, there was no bitterness. How could there be bitterness when what they said, okay, I'm sorry, Rick Rude, okay? What Rick Rude says was true. If it wasn't for the Macho Man and his friendship at the time with Hulk Hogan, I'm sure that I would not even have been part of the equation. And having said that, is that so bad? Yes, friends, there is politics. Sometimes it works with you, sometimes against you. But during the lean years, I persevered. And during the fat years, I also persevered.
Did you see potential in Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart at this time? Did you think they were going to be a big part of WWF in the future?
Yeah. They're both excellent workers. Why not? I mean, why shouldn't they get a break? I mean, I know that there's been a lot of allegations saying who's the best, this or that, blah, 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 blah. Like it matters which octogenarian is a better worker at this stage of the game. I'm not interested in that. They were all great. And each one was an individual. So who's to say what's better, an apple or an orange or a cassava melon? It's all good. You know, so let's just say that, I mean, why get, I'm talking about the Flair Bret Hart situation or Flair's book, they knocked Mick Foley.
Right.
Or this and that. You know something? Mick Foley threw his body off a cage and landed and knocked himself out and went to the hospital. Wouldn't you say that the price he paid for wrestling was enormous? And how can you criticize it by saying he's just a stuntman? No, he isn't just a stuntman. He's a lot more than just a stuntman. He had a personality that the fans loved no matter which gimmick he had. He got over in a myriad of ways. He was an asset to the business. If he came back to the business, he'd be great again. I'm not really interested in knocking success because that makes me feel like a failure. Render under Caesar. You know, give the devil his dues.
I was actually going to ask you about Flair. How did Flair fit into the picture?
Which picture?
When he came into the company.
The company, the World Wrestling
Federation? Yeah, the World
Federation?
Wrestling Federation.
To me, it was excellent. Why wouldn't one of the greatest workers that ever lived, arguably,
Right.
well, that actually one of takes the argument out of it. The only argument would be the greatest worker that ever lived. Well, I don't think there's such a thing as the greatest worker that ever lived. I think that people bring something to the table, okay? And some people bring more, some people less. And since it's a matter of opinion, let's go back to the two words objective and subjective. Like we can prove who the fastest human in the world is. The clock will prove it. But we can't prove, like, for example, we both meet a girl. You think she's beautiful. I think she's a dog. It's the same girl. Okay? Right. So it's like a matter of opinion. Whatever rolls your socks up may not, what to say that what looks funny to you may not look gorgeous to me. So let's all get along. I mean, this is, and the only thing, I read Ric Flair's book, and by the way, when I say that, I mean Keith Elliott Greenberg's book, because he's the writer, you know.
Right.
The only guy that wrote his own book is myself and Mick Foley. But when I wish that, I love Ric Flair, but I wish he had never mentioned these two words, Owen Hart, because unless he was to do it reverently and with his hat off, instead of using it to talk about stuff that doesn't matter. Because in the final analysis, it's a horrible situation of what happened to him. He's a victim of the worst luck a man can have. And let's not mention his name unless it's to say something nice. I mean, please. I mean, why do you want to get petty when the stakes are so high and the family is still bruised? And why bring it up again unless it's to heal, not hurt?
Right. Now, after Curt got hurt, did you fear your spot? And also, how were you actually told by Vince that you were going to be let go?
Vince came to me in Los Angeles and said, Lanny, we're making a few changes, we're letting a few people go, and I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go. And he did it like a gentleman. I handled it like a man. I thought I did. And then I wrote him a letter and said, thank you for the run. I appreciate working for you. However, I did buy several caps and gowns and several more wigs in good faith that I thought my gimmick was going to continue. I have the receipts here. And it came to about $667.25, something like that. I got my caps and gowns legitimately from a cap and gown manufacturer.
Right.
I didn't get them from Mr. Wrestling number 2's wife, the late Olivia. I got them from an actual, I said, who's the best maker of cap and gowns? That was in Champaign, Illinois. I had the receipts, $666, something, whatever. And he didn't call me. He didn't do anything. I just got a letter from him. And in it was a check for $1,000.
Nice.
And I'll tell you something else about him. I mean, because people say horrible things. Let me say this about him. He's a hard guy not to be jealous of, so naturally people want to say horrible things so they can look in the mirror and justify their own pathetic lives. Let me say this about Vince McMahon, that after I was fired or let go or, Donald Trump, you're fired. He did it a little nicer than that. Then I got a phone call from Pat Patterson. He says, Leaping Lanny, how are you doing? I says, this is Pat Patterson. He says, have you ever been to New Zealand? I said, no. He knew I loved to travel. And he says, it's not a World Wrestling Federation sanctioned event. However, Don Morocco has a friend and the Bulldogs are going because that's their home. And we're looking for some talent that would like to go. And he says, we're offering this much money. May I say, okay, $2,000 for 2 weeks' work. What I didn't tell him was, I'd have done it for free. I would have, hey, how would you like to get a plane ticket to New Zealand? And all you have to do is wrestle a little bit.
Right.
Okay? And you get to see you think, I mean, I don't know how jaded you are, but I think that's a great place to go and fantastic memories. And it's another country under my belt. And it looks good on my passport.
Right.
I love going places. I like the Maori tribe and looking at them and seeing everything and experiencing life and the delicacies of distant lands and reading about it and studying and learning and experiencing. I'd have done it for free, but I'm not dumb. I took the money. Okay, I said yes. And then we went there, and as he said, it's not a World Wrestling Federation sponsored event. So one of the things they did wrong was they had poor advertising and they drew a poor crowd. And then the very next morning, we were on the front page, not the sports page, the front page headlines, wrestling comes to Auckland. And Vince McMahon would have never allowed that to happen. He would do the advertising before the event.
Huh.
You see what I mean?
Right.
After won't help you.
Right.
See, Vince was a promoter. The other guys were impersonating a promoter. They think it's easy, so they, after the fact, they get the publicity. Well, that's not going to help you this show, will it? So we went to Auckland. We laid an egg. We did about 8 towns, Rotorua, Wellington. I loved every minute of it. Every inch of it was a threat to my life because it was all through this and that, and there was nothing stopping you from certain death besides sticks and string. They didn't have actual, guardrails. And it was raining, and we were driving too fast, and we're on the wrong side of the road because it's New Zealand.
Right.
So anyway, but I lived to tell about it, and then I got home, and then the phone rings, and it's Vince McMahon's secretary. He says, "Oh, Lanny, did your check bounce yet?" And I said, "No, it will." But Vince says that even though it's not a World Wrestling Federation sponsored event, because he is the one that allowed them to book you, he's going to make the checks good. And I said, really? I didn't know the check would bounce, and I didn't know the checks would be good.
Right.
3 days later, $2,000 came to the door. And I thought to myself, integrity. there are some people that think Vince doesn't have any. I'd like for them to hear that story. And you may say, well, he's rich, he can do it. Business was lousy then, may I tell you. That was when it all hit the fan about the steroids.
Right.
That was when the talent was going down. That was right before the WCW was robbing the talent from Vince and everything. So I'm just saying, no, business was lousy. It's just that every time in the 7 years that I knew him, he had a chance to take the high road or the low road. He always chose the high road.
Switch tapes?
Yep. We're almost wrapping up
Yeah.
now. We're talking wind up in WCW.
I never actually made it to the WCW.
Right. A lot of the guys actually point to your kind of contract as what was wrong with WCW, and how do you respond to that?
They're 100% right. As a matter of fact, this is probably the only thing that I agree with Ole Anderson about. See, when he was the booker or the owner or whatever, he always treated the boss's money like it was his own. Where the people in the WCW, they abused and irresponsibly handled Ted Turner's money. Now, that was before, I guess, they merged with AOL or,
Right.
back when they were the, I don't remember the chronological order of everything, but Ted Turner, in wrestling, when it was just Ted Turner, wrestling was just like an ancillary part of his empire of cable television. Okay, so if he showed a loss, there was no big whoop. But when he had to be accountable to AOL or whatever, you have it doesn't look good on the balance sheet.
Huh.
Now you had people in the WCW that were in charge of making decisions that were letting money hemorrhage from the company. Now, as an individual, I am a successful man because it's not what you make, it's what you save. Let me make a little example. If you have a bucket and there's no hole in the bucket, it doesn't matter if I have an eyedropper. Slowly but surely, I will win. I will fill my bucket and I will live in abundance instead of scarcity. However, and in the case of a multitude of wrestlers, Ric Flair included, and I'm saying it only because I read his book, where he was actually rougher on himself than he was on knocking anybody else. He was actually degrading himself by telling the truth. He was very, very honest in the book, and it was very introspective. But Ric Flair, who has done nothing in this business except succeed, has a larger bucket than me and is filling it up with a garden hose and sometimes a fire hose, not an eyedropper like I had. But because there was a hole in his bucket, it didn't matter because it all goes on the sand. Now, that's only half of the nightmare. Because right now, I'm a certified credit counselor. And my disposable income now is greater than almost every year I've ever had in the wrestling, in the 21 years I've had. Because they give me a check and I have a W-2 and they take out the taxes so I don't have a surprise at the end of the year in case I handled it stupidly.
Right.
Now, in the wrestling business, you're an independent contractor. And if you live like you're in Hollywood and say confetti, and if you have your hole in the bucket, Uncle Sam says now, and we're not impressed with the fact that you're a big deal wrestling star. Now. We want it now. Otherwise, they charge you exorbitant interest. You pay the fine, and you live in red ink for the rest of your life. And it's like you're going to be a prisoner of your own debt. So, I mean, I almost forgot the question, but how do I feel when wrestlers resent that?
Yeah.
They're right. It's 100% right. But also, let me say something else. The Macho Man did an amazing thing. When he was the representative of Slim Jim, he never said no to them. And he always dressed to the nines. And let me tell you how my brother gives an autograph. He says, "Hello, what's your name?" "Oh, Billy." "Michael." "Hey, you're looking good. How you doing?" And he signs his autograph. And he's got a beautiful autograph. And he makes Billy, Mike, or Johnny, or Teresa feel like $10 million. Everybody gets their share. And the reason he does is because he's smart. He was there with me in Hawaii when I was 12 years old. And I went up to Art Linkletter. He wasn't there at the time, but he heard my story. That I said, "Mr. Linkletter?" And I was 12 years old, cute as a bug's ear. "Mr. Linkletter?" I had a pen out. I had all the etiquette you would ever want. "May I have your autograph?" And he was in Waikiki Beach in front of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, and he was reading Variety magazine, and he had a nice chaise lounge. And he says, "Buzz off." And he didn't say buzz. And I was 12, and I was devastated. And I got depressed for about 3 days. My parents finally asked me what happened, and I told them. And they were ready to kill somebody. And then that's when I was 12. 6 years later, I wrestled, and somebody asked me for my autograph, and it just hit me. I have the power to make somebody's day or kill it. Because I know what it's like to be rejected. I know what it's like to be spurned. I know what it's like for somebody to take a pin and burst your bubble for no other reason except laziness or deliberate cruelty. So I have never been too busy to sign an autograph. And in baseball, when they get paid big money to sign autographs, they do it like this. Now, how do you feel? Like a statistic or an individual? Macho Man says, "Yeah, how you doing?" He gives you his attention. He makes it, he's got a beautiful handwriting.
Right.
And he uses it. And he makes it fancy, and he gives your name spelled correct. How do you spell that? And he makes it nice. And he doesn't just do it when he does it every time, all the time, always. And he never turns down an autograph. And myself, I have a sloppy handwriting. However, I type over 90 words a minute. Sorry, I had to put myself over. But that's objective or subjective. You know what I'm saying? Object is, yes, I type very well, and I'm very proud of it. Microsoft Word, got it all, maybe. So what I'm saying is he consistently did that, and he went to, he's not even crazy about NASCAR, but he went there anyway, and he dressed to the nines. You know how he dresses.
Right.
And he suffered in the hot blazing sun watching a sport that he doesn't understand. Cars are going in a circle. I mean, if you're into it, fine. If you're not. But the thing is, he was invited by Slim Jim, and he always attended. He paid his own way, and he developed personal relationships with them. So when he left the WWF and went to the WCW, he had a meeting in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he convinced them to uninvest with Vince McMahon and take their big fat money to Ted Turner. And then it was easy for him to get a contract for me. And I had no intention of not earning my money.
Right. They just didn't bring you in.
I bleached my hair. I bought the gowns. I trained like crazy, although, may I say, I never became the Ultimate Warrior, as you probably know. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even built as well as the Genius used to be because, let's face it, I'm getting older. It's getting more difficult. I still train. I still work out. But it's to look like Jack LaLanne. It's to feel good. And, I want to be vigorous. I want to be vital. So anyway, I worked hard on my gimmick. I worked on the persona. In fact, I even invested in blue contact lenses. I wrote a song for myself. Let's see. I can't remember it. Gorgeous George. They call me Gorgeous George. Something like that.
Right.
With my hair blonde and curly and my eyes of china blue. Now, does that sound like a guy that wants to sit on his butt collecting money? No, I was ready to go out there and do it, but my phone never rang. Okay? Because every time I was going to go, they changed bookers. They changed bookers like they changed their socks. As soon as you didn't draw a house, they changed it again. And then they had a committee, and that's the worst thing in the world. Especially, it needs to be a totalitarian government. A booker should have at least the power to not be negated by either a superstar or by a bunch of committees or pushing it through. I mean, if it was a dictatorship, it would be a little easier. At least give me the ball and let me run with it for a while, whatever. But anyway, I never intended to take more than I gave, but unfortunately, or fortunately, that's how it ended up. But it was not my intention, and a lot of the boys were bitter, and I'm terribly sorry.
What actually led to Randy leaving WWF? Was it money?
No, I think it was because of something else. Boy, I really hate to talk about Randy when he's not here.
Okay.
But I'll just say something and I'll take my chances, okay?
Right.
He was relegated to announcer. And I believe he had an idea to get back in the ring. And I believe they mentioned the age thing, that they were going for a youth movement.
I did hear that.
Okay? And he loves the World Wrestling Federation because he credits them for all the good in his life, all the breaks he's gotten, all the opportunity. They made him what he is. And he's very humble and he sincerely believes that.
Do you think he'll ever go back?
No.
Okay.
I don't think they want him back, and I don't think he has. Okay, let me make my point, and then we'll see. I think I answered that question, but this is an important question because I'm taking liberty here because I'm talking about someone representing somebody who isn't here,
Right.
and somebody that I love very much, my brother. And let me just say about that. He had an idea that he still had something to offer even though he was advancing in years. They rejected this notion. I say they. There's a group. It's not just Vince. You see what I mean? The word old was mentioned, and the word old hurt his feelings. So it's like if you ask a girl out and she says, no, I think you're ugly. Are you going to rebuttal that person, or are you going to get a second opinion? Now, it turned out, usually, if that's the only girl in the world, you have to try to change your mind about whether you're ugly or not. However, in this case, there was another girl, and it's called WCW, and they were offering exorbitant amounts of money, not their money, Ted Turner's money, stockholders' money, whatever, to get the big name stars of the World Wrestling Federation. And he decided to get a second opinion. And it all turned out very, very well for him and for me. Now, you asked me the other question, do you think he'll go back? I think it's a combination of, I don't think he feels that he would represent himself as the Macho Man without hurting the memory of the greatness that he once had. He's got some bad knees. He used to bounce off those ropes faster than you could blink your eyes. He used to have a flourish, and that's when he was young, healthy. And now he's a little bit beaten up, and he's not what he was. He'll admit that. And I think that he's happy in a sedentary lifestyle. I think he's got other goals, other dreams, other ambitions. And I'm sure if his phone rang, he would answer it, as would I. Now, like I said, I'm doing very well as a certified credit counselor.
Right.
It's a sedentary lifestyle. There's a lot of good things about it. I don't have to take bumps. Not that I ever did compared to Mick Foley, but I'm just saying even a little bump hurts. And I'm happy doing what I'm doing. If my phone rang, I would answer it. And if it was Vince McMahon, I know that his word was good because I have 7 years of proof.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
What are your memories about the fights between Randy and Hawk? Did Randy ever tell you anything about that?
okay, what it all boiled down to, and I hate to speak ill of the dead, and I hate to talk about a person who isn't here, but I really hate is one of your fans to buy this video and not get my truth. So let me make a little disclaimer. I wasn't there. I don't know. And some of the people are deceased, like half of the people in this conversation.
Right.
So let me just say this. What Hawk was angry about. He had a mistaken notion that my brother had made a pass at his wife. Now, I know my brother and I met his wife. And may I say, not true. Couldn't possibly. Because my brother, for all the good things about him, is like shallow hell, just like me. And beauty is a very high premium. And this woman was well below his standards. I don't mean to, I wish we'd cut that out, but it's the truth. That's one of the reasons I don't believe it. The other thing is, my brother doesn't go making passes at people's wives. So even if she was beautiful to die for, he wouldn't do that because he's a gentleman. And he's a man of very high moral fabric. As a matter of fact, his standards are way too high for the wrestling business. So he was not even falsely accused. What happened was he was on his way to the ring in Japan, and they have those chutes that you come out of. And Hawk was joking with him moments before, and then he assumed his place and then ambushed him on the way to the ring. Randy, being the professional that he was, took the punch and kept walking to the ring because he had a job to do, and he did his job. And when he came back, he went there to attack Hawk, where the boys split him apart. And that's one. Number two, so you might say Hawk won the sucker punch, 1-0. Hawk won, Randy nothing, he got a little mouse. Then they met again in Tampa. Randy saw him, attacked Hawk. This time, 1-1, okay? And then Hawk litigated. And now since the plaintiff is deceased, I believe it's out of court.
Right.
Randy's a very wealthy man. And he had to spend money on defending himself against a man that was trying to use that as a... So in other words, I wish everybody just grow up.
Right.
And I do not believe that Randy would ever make a pass at another man's wife, especially somebody in the wrestling business. Because we have a little bit of honor amongst ourselves. And Randy is a man of great principle. He's a very disciplined individual, enough to make himself throw with the wrong hand in baseball. Well, he is a no-nonsense type of guy. He has a lot of fun. He's a very funny person. But I don't believe it for a minute, okay? And I think the whole thing was ridiculous, and I'm sorry it ever happened.
What are your thoughts on the death of Elizabeth and the way it's been handled in the media?
Well, give me an example of how do you think it was handled in the media, and then I'll respond to it.
Well, do you agree with what Vince McMahon did with Lex Luger as far as,
What did he do?
He did the confidential piece where they actually aired the phone call that Lex made to 911.
Well...
And what's Randy and your family think about the entire incident?
Well, okay, that's about 4 questions, and I needed to know all of them. Now I'm okay for an answer. Very delicate subject matter. But I don't think it's wrong if you have a TV show called Confidential. If people are going to live so carelessly as they put poisons into their body, what's wrong with Vince McMahon making his TV show a little bit more interesting? And the fans are interested because they do sell a lot more at National Enquirers than they do the New York Times. I'm just saying, why shouldn't, if they have access to it and it's called freedom of the press, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't blame Vince McMahon for showing this, and it might do somebody some good. Somebody might just look at this story and say, perhaps I shouldn't take Soma and drink vodka. I mean, duh, that's what's happening to almost everybody on the list of dead wrestlers. They're all taking pills and liquor. They don't mix. First of all, I don't think you should take pills or liquor, but you should never take pills and liquor. I mean, one's bad, the other's bad, but together it's poison and it's deadly. Can't somebody get the idea? Let's just learn from that. I mean, people are living very recklessly. And sometimes it's pain pills, Percodan, and all this stuff, these words. Merck had to, I know this is not time sensitive. People will be buying or not buying this interview into the future, but you've always got these companies like Merck and Pfizer that are withdrawing their drugs because they have horrible side effects.
Did your family at all talk to Lex? Did you or your brother talk
I
to Lex after?
I haven't seen him. Nobody's seen Lex. We did send lots of flowers and cards, and we didn't go to Frankfort, Kentucky, where the funeral was, but we sent our sympathy to the family. And on Randy's website, he expressed his sadness over the shocking. Nobody blames Lex Luger for what happened to Elizabeth, if that's where you're going.
Right.
I've been talking too long.
Okay.
No, I'm okay. But that's why I'm having a little trouble. I'm not crying or getting emotional. I'm just, it's been a long day. Okay, but no, nobody blames Lex Luger because we believe that everybody's responsible for what they put into their own bodies. And whoever self-poisoned himself or herself is the person who is responsible for themselves. I mean, once we reach the age of 18 and 21, we're responsible for what we put into our bodies. No, nobody thinks that Lex Luger did anything to Elizabeth. It was a tragedy. Let's leave it that way. I mean, whatever happiness they gave each other, I hope it was something nice. It was a horrible ending. Let's learn from it and let's move on.
Right now, you're talking about your future, and I know you did an infomercial. I've seen that on TV, and you also have a book coming out.
Yes, I was lucky enough to have gotten involved with Fitness Quest out of Kenton, Ohio, and actually 2.5 years in a row I've been on worldwide television, endorsing a product that I do believe in, because there's many exercises that are dangerous to your joints. This is an exercise that is easy on the joints, easy on the credit card, and not available in the stores. Here's how to order. But wait, there's more. So anyway, it was a lot of fun to do. It put my face right back out there. Maybe you've seen my face. Maybe you think it doesn't belong out there. Maybe I should hide it. But it's pretty to me. Like I said. But anyway, and I'm a certified credit counselor, and what I do is I help people that have unsecured debt, which means basically credit card debt, also signature loans. Oh, let's see. There's 3 things that you need to know before we go into this. Number 1, this is not a loan, so we don't do a credit check on you. Number 2, all payments get processed directly through your checking account. That eliminates late payments and over the limit fees, and it saves you the hassle of writing out checks. And number 3, and most importantly, everything we consolidate, we're going to close. So keep that in mind. Only give me the cards that you don't mind closing, and later on down the line, you can add cards into the mix if you feel they're mistreating you. And I'm talking about people that are paying over 12%. APR,
Right.
and some people are paying 29%, and it's so sad. It's almost funny, but the people paying 29%, and I don't think it's sad that those are the people that say, "How is this going to affect my credit?" Excuse me, but your credit and your life are in the toilet now, and if I hand you a life jacket, are you going to complain because it's hurting the crease in your pants? Okay, you know what I mean? It's like there's a fire, and I'm a fireman, and I've got an escape route for you. I mean, it's just part of what I deal with, and what can I say? I'm great at my job, so much so that I don't need wrestling anymore, but I certainly have nothing to offer a paying customer except on the microphone. but nothing in the ring, I'm sure, because I neither have the ability nor the desire to thrill the audience with my body. I have enormous respect for the people that are doing it now. I remember CNN. Do you remember CNN when they had Bruno Sammartino, Barry O, and Vince McMahon?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bruno was going, I'll tell you today, no, in my day. So then Vince McMahon said something, and there was cutaways.
Right.
I'm glad they weren't in the studio together.
Oh,
Because it would have been
they might be working together now.
gunfight at the OK Corral. So Bruno says, hey, don't talk to me like that. I am Bruno Sammartino. Bruno Sammartino. And Vince McMahon says, so what? What's that, a demigod? Bruno, please do not give Vince McMahon a straight opening. Because he will fill it. It's like, I wouldn't have the guts to, you know who I am? The thing is, once you're not on TV, the public has a short memory. If you're not on TV this week, you are a forgotten man, And Ole Anderson, Bruno Sammartino, even you heard Ox Baker's. That's like, that was a guy with a money face and a money interview, but don't even talk about anything between the ropes. Okay, when the bell rings, he's great at like three things in the business, and he's totally void at the other. I'm talking about, he's got the showbiz, he doesn't have the go biz, and if you were in the room, he knows it too. But he was saying, I don't like what's happening today. Okay, let me tell you something about what's happening today. Whether you like it or don't like it, it is what's happening today. Why don't you accept it? All you old, miserable people who can't stand the fact that you have passed the torch to the new generation, why don't you just wish them well and go home? Why do you have to trash the business every time somebody's stupid enough to put a camera lens in your face and roll the tape? Because what you are doing is trying to do something that can't be done. You're trying to not sell tickets. You're trying to urinate in the soup that everybody did drink from. And now other people would like a little taste, but you're trying, since you can't rule the business anymore, you're trying to ruin the business. I am for, and I believe that I want to be happy and successful, but I can also, I don't feel any less worthwhile as an individual if other people are doing well too. Why do I have to be like a lion that has a full belly that doesn't want anybody else to eat? That's really what they're saying. In my day, I got news for you, Bruno. In your day, it was all real when you did it, right? Is that why you wore a toupee in the ring? With everybody instructions not to pull it? You know what I mean? Since it was such a shoot in your day. I love Bruno. He was an icon, but I use that word "was" with great vociferousness, And isn't that great? He says, I'm Bruno. Not anymore, you're not. You're just old Bruno. Because unless you're on TV this week, your Q level drops, right?
Right.
And there's only a few people, like Babe Ruth. He died broke. Greatest star of the first half of the 20th century, was not even well treated by the New York Yankees at the end there because you can't hit home runs. FO.
They let him go.
Yeah, and he's the guy that saved baseball after the 1919 World Series.
He wanted to be the manager, and they said no, leave. So.
Yeah, and I had something to say about baseball too, since I know something about it. Like one of the greatest moments of my life was in Joe Robbie Stadium, which is now Pro Player Park. I got a chance to introduce Ted Williams. I'm embarrassed to say that I made a lot of money that night. I would have done it for free. But like I said, if they want to pay me, I'll take it. But it was the greatest, just to introduce him. And I said, through all of the magnificence that is Joe Robbie Stadium, the Marlins and the Dolphins' happy home, it gives me pride to introduce a man who was to baseball what Romulus and Remus were to Rome. Take 95 until you hit the Massachusetts Turnpike. Get off at Fenway Park and there you are. for back in 1941, this man hit 406. And even now, Ted Williams has no par. America anticipated every turn at bat to watch him knock the ball to smithereens. 521 home runs are even more incredible because he gave 5 years to the Marines. The boys who wrote the sports page never did him any favors, but for Cooperstown they had to tell the truth. That Theodore Samuel Williams brought a splendor to the game, reminiscent of the late George Herman Ruth. And then he gets up, he puts his arms around me, he's crying, and he says, "Oh, genius, if I'd have had you for a press agent, I wouldn't have had any trouble." And that was like a moment in my life. I mean, just reliving it. So here we are in Boston. I did it yesterday on television, and the switchboard lit up, and it made me feel pretty good. You know, there's some moments in my life I just thought of another one. And I need to tell the people this because you've suffered through all the other cobwebs that I've had. And I'll go back to your questions in a minute, but there's something a little bit. I had a complete metamorphosis at the low point of my life. Vince McMahon had already given me his notice, but I was wrestling out my final 10 days. I found myself in Moncton, New Brunswick, and I was very soul sick and depressed. And I thought, why hast thou forsaken me? Why am I sitting here in the same town that I was married in with my marriage falling apart? And why, in this business I love, am I being asked to leave? And why, if all this is happening, why do I have to? I mean, I've been wrestling since I was 18, right out of high school. I didn't know I could do as well as I have. I didn't know God would open bigger doors for me. I didn't know that I was actually blessed. I thought it was the end of the road, but it's actually the bend in the road. So I'm sitting there feeling sorry for myself, having my pity party. And I was saying, woe is me. And then my life changed. 2 young men from high school, not punks, you could tell right away. They said, "Mr. Poffo?" And I looked up and I said, "Well, Lanny, but yes." He says, "We're high school students in Moncton, and Moncton is where I spent the summer of 1978 and 1983, and I was top babyface there. I was the biggest fish in the smallest pond they've ever had. You know, I'm not saying I was a big deal, but I wasn't surprised when he says, 'You're my favorite wrestler, and we have a friend on the hockey team that skated headlong into the rink and broke C4, cervical vertebrae number 4, which is not as bad as what happened to Christopher Reeve, which is C1, which should have killed him. But he's about to leave for Toronto because Canada has socialized medicine. He's about to leave for Toronto where they have the finest rehabilitation program in the world, in Canada anyway. It's a matter of opinion what the world has to offer. But at least it's free. And it's a place he can go to find out what he's going to be able to use and what not. So he said, you're his favorite wrestler. Would you come with us? Because we're having a party for him because he's leaving soon for Toronto. And he's going to stay there for quite a while. And I said, yes, let me make one phone call. And I called the person that I was going to ride with to the arena. And I said, I only have one condition. It's a 7:30 show. I have to be there by 6:30. Otherwise, I'm fined. Can you make sure that I took my wrestling gear? Can you make sure you get me? Because, you know, they will fine you. Right. And I'm not into that. I think it's okay that they fine you but I'm saying let's avoid it at all costs.
Right.
So I go into the hospital, and in this room, it's as big as this room, but it's full of must have been 20 people. Boys and girls. His girlfriend was there. He was wearing a halo. Do you know what a halo is?
Yes.
Okay. For those of you that don't know what a halo is, it looks like a halo, and what it does, it immobilizes your neck. The kid broke his neck playing hockey. And here I was feeling sorry for myself because I'm having a divorce and I lost my job. Or I'm about to lose my job. I have to fulfill the bookings. So I go into the room, And the love and the energy level that was in that room, and said, Lanny, you came, and the parents came up to me and said, oh, he loves you. There he is and everything. And we talked, and then I played a little game of I said, give me a topic, I'll give you a poem. So I'm very good at this. You tell me any topic, I'll give you a poem about that subject. Boom, boom, boom. I did 15 in a row and never failed. And we were laughing, we were having fun. I was having a rush of endorphins and serotonin. I was feeling happy because of the love I was sharing and bringing to this young man that had nothing. That had everything, his whole future was ruined and destroyed. And then, oh man, we were on a roll. It was a happy place. You wouldn't believe that a hospital could be happy like that. And then he says, Lanny, can you sign the front of my book? So they got the big book where everybody had signed it. And on the front was his picture and a lot of white space. And nobody had signed the front of his book yet. And he thought enough of me to sign the front of my book. He said, and would you write a poem for me? So everybody's looking at me. And I can't write anything to this boy. Because if I were in his shoes, I would beg you to kill me. I couldn't have the guts to face life like that, you know, and be an invalid and be crippled like that and have to fight to just, and never have bathroom privileges or never, you know, the things that we take for granted because we have 2 loaves of bread under each arm and we're not appreciative of every moment that we're alive and have good health. You know, moments ago, I was in the lobby thinking I was the unhappiest man in the world, you know, thinking that God didn't love me anymore, thinking that I was smited. Or like Job or something. Anyway, so what happened was, everybody's looking at me and I can't write a word. And I said, hey, goldfish don't make love when you're watching. Everybody speak amongst yourselves. You know, like, talk amongst yourselves.
Right.
So I made my prayer and I said, God, I apologize for not being grateful that my daughter's normal, that she's not got any handicaps, and that I've been blessed with great abundance instead of being worried about all these little things like divorce and losing my job, when I know that I've got everything it takes for the journey ahead. If I can let go of the past and concentrate with your help. And I said, please, I wouldn't have the guts to face what this boy's going to face. I said, so I have no idea what kind of a poem I can write for him that's going to help him. Please give me the words that's going to help him, because of and by myself, I can't even draw a deep breath. And as soon as I asked for help, God gave the poem to me, and I was only his vessel. Moncton is a Catholic town. I looked on that guardrail and I saw a big crucifix, about that big, with Jesus on the cross. Instantly, the cross is on your right-hand rail. His love will see you through. But even if you lose your faith, he still believes in you. And you could have cut it with a knife. The love that was in that room, that was what I call, whatever you want to call it, the joy of the Holy Spirit is what I choose to call it. But what I learned was, I could be the happiest man in the world if I could just be an instrument of the peace of God. In other words, I've been gifted with God's love through me that I can forgive anybody, my ex-wife, Ole Anderson, all of these people that tried to hold me down. They couldn't, because I'm a sponge. I always rose to the top. And with God's love, through him, I can forgive anybody. And that's the secret of the fact that why I don't look my age. Because I've been living on serotonin and endorphins, and those make it impossible for you to get sick, that make it impossible for you to prematurely age. It's more important than your diet. If you're miserable, you get ugly. If you're happy, and healthy, you become thankful and you walk in blessedness. I don't want to turn this into a big thing. I do follow Deepak Chopra. And as a matter of fact, in 3 weeks, I'm taking my daughter and her boyfriend to see Rhonda LaRue, who drinks from the same well as Dr. Richard Moss. And please, if you're listening, go on the internet and look at these people. You've got nothing to lose. They're talking about love, not hate. Anyway, sorry to get off the subject. Okay. Ask me a question. I'm a little...
I was going to ask you if you have any regrets and if there's anything you want to say to your fans that you never had a chance to say before.
Well, thank you for all the fans that have taken the time to introduce themselves to me. Thank you for must have been hundreds of thousands of Frisbees that were bought. I always wanted to prove, what I used to do is win, lose, or draw, even when I lost to George Scoland. I always went to the venues, and if they bought Frisbees or didn't buy Frisbees, I said, what's your name? I'll sign your autograph. Even if they didn't want to see me particularly, is that everybody else? No, I'm sorry, I'm it. Okay, well, you'll have to do then. Even if they were not as happy to see me as I was to see them. Hundreds of thousands of Frisbees at $3 a piece were bought by the fans. Thank you for each person that bought a Frisbee and kept one, because I meet people like that all the time wherever I go. And I'm sorry I was never given a doll. My daughter would have loved to play with a figure of mine. But why would I want to look at that? I'm just mentioning, these are some of the albatross that I've had to deal with. What I'm into now, and what I wish the fans would understand, is when I go to schools and I try to influence them, it's because 100% of my progeny is non-smoking and is positively achieving. I only have one daughter, and she's chosen to live the clean life. And may she always be smoke-free for life. Now I'm talking about your sons and daughters. I'm going to help. That's why I'm writing my book. It's not an expose. It's not who's having sex with whom. It's not, notice the proper grammar? Okay, anyway, this is my book, and it's called Limericks from the Heart and Lungs. And it's available Amazon.com, and you can type in my name, Lanny Poffo, or Limericks from the Heart and Lungs. Or you can, if you don't have an internet, like I think maybe 3 people don't, let me see if I can remember the phone number, 1-800-382-7922. Now, I'm not going to repeat it. Rewind the tape or whatever you got, DVD, whatever it is. Now, in the book are 2 poems that are not limericks. One of them is very important, and it's what I use in positive action assemblies. Always strive to be your best in everything you do. Don't worry if there's someone else who's luckier than you. You don't have to finish first. Just finish fair and square. With a little perseverance, the tortoise beats the hare. Your only competition is laziness and fear. Trade them for a double dose of courage, strength, and cheer. And don't you ever feel ashamed if someone laughs at you. You're in some fancy company. They laughed at Lincoln, too. No smoking, drugs, or alcohol. You're worth too much for that. You're a decent human being, not some laboratory rat. My thanks to all the boys and girls for making me your guest. I'm not a real genius, but I strive to be my best. And then also in the book is one I wrote for Special Olympics. And I also felt this was a God poem, because I thought to myself, let me do something for these children. Let me do something for the parents. Because my daughter is normal, that's why. Because I'm thankful that my daughter is normal. So let me be an instrument of healing and love to help these children and help these parents, because theirs is a heavier load than mine. So out of thankfulness and gladness, I write this. It's called the Special Olympics. And there's something about that name. It's taking people off the bench and putting them back in the game. No one should ever be denied the chance to grab the center stage or share an honest, open smile with other boys and girls their age for personal satisfaction or just having a little fun. The spirit of competition is the birthright of everyone. It's a very special moment when they pass that torch and run. In the words of Charles Dickens, God bless us, everyone. So, limericks from the heart and lungs. A limerick is, there once was a man from Nantucket.
Right.
But mine aren't dirty because I'm trying to get this into the school system, right? Mine are nice. I write nice limericks. Nothing sexually overt. No gratuitous violence.
Right.
Okay? The only thing is, like Frankenstein would say, smoking, bad. Okay? That's my relentless message in 335 limericks and many beautiful illustrations, may I add. Okay. 3 smokers with nothing to do were spending some time at the zoo. As they lit up to smoke, I heard one monkey joke, "Hey look, human see, human do." If smoking is cool as they claim, then why is it always the same? The first time you try, you wish you could die, the last time achieving your aim. I always refuse to comply with smokers who want me to try. My first cigarette, which I haven't had yet, I just tell them, no thank you, goodbye. Let's see, a smoker from Lima, Peru, fell in love with a lady named Sue. But when he got close, she thought it was gross. He smelled just like Pepe Le Pew. Let's see. At the beginning of the book, it's for can't read kids.
Right.
And read to me kids. And then it grows and then up to college level and finally adulthood. And in the back is a glossary of 200 words so you can build your vocabulary as your reading levels improved. But another one for the children. Absorbent and yellow is he in his pineapple under the sea. The ocean's too wet for a lit cigarette. That's why SpongeBob is happy, smoke-free. I like SpongeBob. It said, oh, why was the dolphin so sad? His life had no purpose. That's bad. But my corniest pun is still kind of fun. I'm Lanny, the non-smoking dad. Thank you. I'm not going to read the whole thing. However, what I'm trying to pull here is, I said before, a life is not judged by duration. In other words, I can live 100 years or 200 years. It's judged by donation. It's what did I give? Because eventually, I'm going to leave this horn of plenty for the horn of Gabriel, and I'm going to have to take a tone for myself. And I believe that what you have done for the least of my brethren, you have done for me. So what have I done for the least of my brethren? Well, I'm going to take the number one cause of preventable death, and I am going to try to do for the children what I've done for my own daughter. I'm going to try to set an example and to apply peer pressure to help the children choose a smoke-free, drug-free life. And it's a statistical fact that non-smokers don't do drugs. That only smokers do drugs. Now, you can't judge the universal by the particular, but that's the way to bet. Okay, now there are exceptions. I'm not here to talk about the exceptions. I'm here to talk about the rule. I can't solve the world with one book. But if I can solve your world with one book, if I can add 30 years to your life, which statistically, and save for secondhand smoke, or if at the very least, help you at least avoid a habit that's helping you spend $1,000 extra per year. And don't tell me about the economy improving, because that money that you're not spending on cigarettes is going to go towards other things that are going to improve the economy. I won't listen to that argument. It's like you're going to spend it somewhere, and you're helping the economy by spending it anywhere else. Anyway, I hate smoking. I don't hate smokers. Let's see, if I do not hate smokers per se. I just try to keep them at bay. I can't remember it. I'm sorry. But something like that.
You want people to know you're not gay.
Oh, okay. I want people to know I'm not gay. See, I'll think of the rhymes, don't you? Okay.
Okay. Suppose I put you to a test and I say, come up with a rhyme for our video and the shoot interview concept.
Okay, I'll have to mail that one to you. I was thinking about, I use selective deafness. If there's a room full of people, I hear what I want to hear.
I hear you.
I hear, poetic topics. Let's see if I can come up with something that might appease you since I've been put on the spot. Let me think. Well, in the concept of shoot interviews, I have a poem which I did not write, but it has to do with looking the whole world in the face, for you owe not any man. Okay, and before we were on the air, you were telling me about all the excellent interviews that had been done before me. And you were mentioning people like Jake the Snake Roberts. You were mentioning people like Raven. And what were some other...
The Road Warriors were...
The Road Warriors were excellent. And all these great people that have looked in and said what was... as George Costanza says in Seinfeld, remember, it's not the truth. Remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. In other words, your truth and my truth may be two different truths. So it's still what you find in your heart. And it's like even Ole Anderson, he tells the truth, even when he lies, because it's like he's been in the water so long he doesn't even realize he's wet. So it's, to him, that is the truth. So let me give you a poem about what it is to stand and be a man and tell the truth. And I didn't write this poem because I don't consider plagiarism a joke. As a matter of fact, I'd rather get caught shoplifting than signing my name to something that somebody else has done. Have you ever heard of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. He's a big deal.
Right.
Okay, in the world of poetry. And here's a poem that you should already know. And it's about a shoot interview. It's about saying what's in your heart without fear of contradiction, without fear of reproach. It's about standing and delivering. And I would say, if you're going to have a hero, why not have him? The Village Blacksmith by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Under a spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands. The smith, a mighty man is he, with large and sinewy hands. And the muscles on his brawny arms are strong as iron bands. His hair is crisp and black and long. His face is like the tan. He works each day from morn till night. He earns whate'er he can. And he looks the whole world in the face, for he owes not any man. Week in, week out, from morn till night, you can hear his bellows blow. You can hear him swing his heavy sledge with measured beat and slow, like a sexton ringing the village bells when the evening sun is low. And children coming home from school look in at the open door. They love to see his flaming forge and hear his bellows roar, and catch the burning sparks that fly like chaff from a threshing floor. On Sunday, he goes to the church and sits among his boys. He hears the parson pray and preach. He hears his daughter's voice. She's singing in the village choir, and it makes his heart rejoice. It sounds to him like her mother's voice, singing in paradise. His needs must think of her once more, as in her grave she lies, and with a large rough hand he wipes a teardrop from his eyes. Toiling, rejoicing, sorrowing, onward through life he goes. Each morning sees a task begin. Each evening sees its close. Something attempted, something done. He's earned his night's repose. Thanks. Thanks to thee, my worthy friend, for the lessons thou hast taught. For at the burning forge of life, our fortunes must be wrought, and with each sounding anvil shaped, each burning deed in thought.
TitleMatchNetwork.com